and represent my community. So I thought, why not start at a young age? So when I grow up, perhaps I can be in Parliament one day. I feel like I should take advantage of these opportunities and make sure that I advocate on behalf of women, especially in my community that are subjected to family violence.
My name's Leslie. I have been with Moreland Family Daycare as an educator for over 36 years, I think. Family Daycare is a wonderful organisation. We look after children in our own home, they blend in with the family, and it's fantastic.
I love Family Daycare.
I can choose my own hours, very flexible. I've made wonderful friendships with lots of the families. I'm now looking after children of the children I used to care for. The children just growing and developing is a wonderful, wonderful experience for me every day. I'd recommend Family Daycare to anybody and everybody. Oh, where's my Scouty snuggle? Where's my Scouty snuggle? Can I have a Scouty snuggle? How's your tea party going?
My name's Hilary. I've been with Moreland Family Daycare for 8 months now and I absolutely love it. The main reason I started with Family Daycare was to be with my little one. Family Daycare is a small environment, so mostly I only have 4 children and it's in a home. Moreland have been really supportive with the whole thing and they helped me find children when I first started. There's so many benefits of working in Family Daycare and becoming an educator. Working in your own home, flexible hours, also just watching the other children grow and being such a part of their life. I recommend to educators that want a good life balance if they have their own child. Family Daycare is a great avenue to go down.
Hey Moreland, today I'm down in St Kilda for the Midsummer Pride March supporting the LGBTQ.
Rich diversity of this municipality. Members of the gallery, please note that council meeting is being recorded and web streamed live on council's website and Facebook. This recording will also be available as video on demand. Gallery attendees are advised that they may be recorded during this meeting. Members of the gallery, in the event of an emergency or disruption, we may be required to take action to ensure the safety of attendees. Please follow the directions issued by council staff and security officers should this happen. Thank you for your understanding and your cooperation. Councillors, just a reminder that in line with the adopted Councillor Code principles as outlined in the Councillor Code of Conduct, councillors should ensure that they conduct themselves in the meeting with integrity, impartially exercising their responsibilities in the interest of the local community and not improperly seek to confer or advantage any person. This behaviour will support principles of leadership and good governance that secures public confidence in the office of councillor. So I'd like to introduce the other councillors as well that are here tonight. Immediately to my right, the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Natalie Abood.
Evening.
And then Councillor Helen Davidson.
Good evening.
And to my left, Councillor Dale Martin. Councillor Mark Riley.
Hello.
Councillor Lambros Tapanos. Hello. And Councillor Oscar Yildiz. Officers in attendance, we have to my immediate left, the Chief Executive Officer, Norina Di Lorenzo. To my far right, Grant Thorne, Director of City Infrastructure, Arden Joseph, Director of Social Development, Kirsten Costa, Director of Planning and Economic Development. And to my immediate left, James Scott, Director of Corporate Services, Sally Curran, Governance Coordinator, Manager of Governance and Property, Olivia Wright, and on the right in the far corner there, we have the Executive Manager of Organisational Development, Anita Craven. Before we go any further tonight, And before we can move on to apologies, Councillor, councillors, I do believe it would be remiss not to mention the announcement that took place just after 10 o'clock this morning. I think that this morning's announcement on marriage equality needs to be recognised. This councillor has been at the forefront of this issue, believing that not only all councillors at Moreland, but more particularly our residents were in majority support of the yes vote. Today we find that Victoria had the highest of any yes vote of any state, with 64.9% of Victorians saying yes. 70% of people who live in Wills said yes. And the electorate of Wills very much marries the municipality of Moreland. Of course, at this point, we haven't had legislative change. This council has advocated for so, and we hope that that happens in the very, very near future. So I think it's important that we do acknowledge the yes vote this morning and council's role in that as a key member of the community. So thank you, councillors. Now, before I call for apologies, I would like to note, councillors, that we have a leave of absence from Councillor Mark Riley from the 16th to the 20th of November to the 28th of November 2017 included. Could I have a motion to approve the leave of absence? The Deputy Mayor, Councillor Abood, seconded by Councillor Davidson. Any discussion? All in favour? I declare that carried. I'd like to have a motion to accept the apologies of Councillor Ali and Farley, who is interstate at the moment, and Councillor Anna Olivia Carley-Hannon, who has taken ill today. Moved by Councillor Riley, seconded by Councillor Martin. Any discussion? Put that to the vote. All those in favour? Declare that carried. Yes, and Councillor Bolton will be here but is running late. Councillors, are there any interests or conflicts of interest to be declared tonight? And the councillors currently in attendance? There are none. Right. Confirmation of the minutes. Councillors, could I have a motion for the adoption of the minutes held on the 11th of October and the 30th of October 2017? Moved by Councillor Davidson, seconded by Councillor Riley. Any discussion on the minutes? There being no discussion, I'll put those to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Petitions. We have one petition already registered, which is a request for speed reduction mechanisms in Taylor Street, North Fitzroy. And I believe we have one in the public gallery as well from Federation Village residents. Yes. Would you like to stand up and talk for a moment to your petition, just to give us an idea? Yes, that'd be lovely. Thank you so much.
My name is Judith Williams, and
yes.
I live at Federation Village.
Yes.
We, the residents of Federation Village, have petitioned against Oswell Communities with the development of 6 new units. We have submitted our objection to the Moreland City Council with their number MPS 1997-262B. And I have put it to all councillors. The impact of erecting 2 units at the entrance of our village is of our highest safety concerns for all residents. This, we believe, will cause traffic chaos with entering and exiting our village. It is already a nightmare getting out onto Box Farms Road. Vehicles stop on to keep clear, and to do a right-hand turn is so dangerous. Where the units are to be built on our lovely park is our excavation area, assembly area, in emergency in the village. This has not been addressed to where we're going to be safe. We believe that Oswell should look into the problems that are already in the village. Nervous.
That's right, Judith. You're going wrong.
The overflow of raw sewage that came from the top of the village, impacting on Unit 179, is of a serious and environmental issue when blockage occurs. We believe that this should be monitored. The top end of the village is known to be a floodplain. When it rains, it flows down to Willow Tree Lane and other areas of the village and floods. In Willow Tree Lane, houses are once again being lifted, and is the ground stable? When entering our village, you see trees, lawn, flowering bushes. It is so peaceful to see this. We are pleading to the Moreland City Council not to permit Oswald to build 2 houses and take this park away from us residents. We need to see green and have safety coming and going. Please take a look at our concerns.
Thank you very much, Judith. Thank you for that. So we have a planning petition there. So it's regarding the same petition, sir? It is. At that point, we'll just leave it at the person presenting the petition. So we note the petition at this point, and at this point, that's all we do. But obviously, you'll be informed in the process as the planning process progresses. All right. So I believe there was a petition also from the Muslim Welfare Service Incorporated that Councillor Carly Hannam was going to raise.
I've been delegated that.
Right. Can we have that one noted as well? So we're having, at this moment, we're moving the receiving of all 3 petitions, the request for speed reduction mechanisms in Taylor Street, North Fitzroy. That's right, yep. Okay, and we'll have what's noted there too, knowing that it has been submitted to the Planning Department already. And the third one, the petition from the Muslim Welfare Services Incorporated. So for all those 3 petitions to be received, I've got Councillor Riley moving that and Councillor Abood seconding. Any debate on that? We'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Thank you very much indeed. So those petitions have been noted at this point. As I say, because it's a planning matter, you'll be informed as it progresses through the planning department. Thank you very much, Judy. All right, now question time. Now, one thing I did neglect to do at the beginning, councillors, I wanted to welcome members of the Moreland Venturers who are here tonight. We've got 14 to 18-year-olds. And some of these venturers are using attendance at tonight's meeting as part of their citizenship component for their Queen Scout Award. So I welcome the venturers, and I also welcome their leader Ross Millard, and I know they've got some other leaders here tonight. So thank you for your work, and thank you for attending tonight's meeting. All right, I think we can move on to. Do we have any on notice items? No, that's our later, isn't it? Question time. All right, so we can move straight on to question time, I believe. This is an opportunity for 30 minutes for the citizens of Moreland to raise questions to councillors. I would like to outline the process. Please note that if your question relates to a matter on any of the officers' report, this is the time to raise the questions with us. A maximum of 2 questions is allowed per person. A maximum of 3 questions will be heard on any one subject. Council will then proceed to the next subject, returning to the previous subject only if time allows. If your question cannot be answered, we will take it on notice and we've responded to between now and the next council meeting. If a response to your question is provided at tonight's meeting, there'll be no further formal response. However, council will action any commitments made while answering the question. We have 30 minutes and I want to make sure that we hear as many questions as possible. And so I'll ask the questioners an opportunity to put your question, the context of your question, but I will encourage you to get to your question as quickly as possible. And the commencement time is 7:12. All right. So I think our first question tonight is from Nick Dolby regarding bikes.
Thank you for the opportunity, councillors. In the council meeting tonight, you're considering 2 reports on bikes, one on the ongoing process of the implementation of the bicycle strategy and one on Gaffney Street. At least 3 of the members of the Committee of Moreland Bicycle User Group are here today, and we'd like to thank you for those reports. We'd like to thank you for the work that you have done, and we recognise that you are trying to do more. But we want more. We thank you for pushing the link up to the Western Ring Road, but where's Cumberland Road? Where is the concentration of effort north of Bell Street? We want to improve the lives of cyclists north of Bell Street. We want to massively increase the number of people using bicycles as transport north of Bell Street, and we're asking for more from council. So thank you, and we want more. And I won't mention congratulating you on Moreland Affordable Housing Limited. Yes, that's it.
No worries. Thank you very much, Nick. And thanks for the advocacy of Bug too. Do I have a councillor who would like to respond? Councillor Martin.
I can respond just briefly in regards to that. You want more, I want more as well, and I think there's a few councillors here that want to see more. Tonight we have the report coming up. I'll actually be moving an alternative motion to be pushing for option 2 in the paper, which is to achieve all of our short-term projects as well as our top 10 priorities moving forward. So if that's enough for you to go on, we are really pushing forward this, and Moreland's integrated transport strategy as well is something that we're reviewing at the moment, and we're really pushing some cycling coming through that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Nancy Aitken.
Hi. I came this evening to ask councillors to please support the resolution. It's going to be moved by Councillor Bolton and seconded by Councillor Tapanos regarding Serenading Adela, a street opera. And I think many of you are aware of this terrific project, which has arisen out of council working together with a network of local citizens who thought it was right that the full history of the First World War be told, not only honouring the people who died in the war, but also honouring those people who wisely opposed the war. As a result of the community network and the work of the council, there's been a number of significant events over the past 2 years. There's been a series of public meetings and a conference organised by our network. The council has organised a new artwork, and there have been street walks. There was a song project funded by council in the last financial year. And this year we have Serenading Adela, a street opera, which commemorates a night a bit like last night, but without air conditioning, so that when people gathered outside Penfridge, just across the road, to sing to Adela Pankhurst, who was locked up inside because of her anti-war activities, within a short time, 300 people had come to join the throng. And the newspaper reports of the cooeys and coloured lights and singing were so colourful that we thought that we should apply for funding to have what we're calling a street opera, which we've done. We were lucky to get funding from Creative Victoria. We got a further $1,500 by vote of council earlier this year, and we fundraised approximately another $10,000 through our supporters and from the trade union movement. So it's been a fabulous community effort. We've got about 70 people so far in a choir. We've got a dozen people in a street band, and we've got the kids from the Brunswick Secondary College going to come and sing a song, and we hope to get another 50 people at our December rehearsal for a bigger group who'll also sing with us.
All right, Nancy, I think we've got the idea.
Okay, got the idea.
You've done it very well.
Yes. The problem is, what if it rains? We're performing at Pentridge on this centenary night. We need a wet weather fallback, in particular for the 7th of January and for Saturday the 6th of January, when we have our dress rehearsal. We'd also like it for 2 nights earlier that week. The quote we've got from councillors for $5,300, and we don't have that funding. We've requested for use of the hall. We're happy to talk to the council staff about how to best minimise costs, but I'm just
Thank you, Nancy. I think you put your case very well. Thank you so much. And thank you for the work you've done on that commemoration. It's been magnificent. We have Catherine Oakley.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Look, I'm here with regards to the Medina Village parking issues again. I note that Councillor Erfanley and Councillor Bolton are not present, but they're probably 2 of the councillors that are most closest to this issue.
Councillor Bolton will be here, by the way.
Yes. Now, I have received a response from Councillor Bolton in the meantime, and she's actually made an appointment to come out and have a look at the area with me on Saturday morning to meet. So really, I just wanted to get an understanding as to where we might be at, apart from this visit on Saturday morning. I understand that Councillor Erfanley has moved a motion to have a review.
Can I explain that? He has asked one of us to do so.
Right.
He can't do it in absence, but he has, and I believe, I'm of the understanding that that will be a motion that's put tonight for deferral.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, whether it's accepted or not will be at the whim of the council.
Sure, all right. You know, the issues are obviously still there, so it'll be great to somehow
Have some time.
Get a resolution to this.
Understood.
He has asked for a suggestion or a recommendation as to what we see, the residents see as a suitable resolution, and my recommendation would be for the indented parking in some of the unused space or the extremely wide nature strips. So
thank you, Catherine.
it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it over the weekend.
And thank you for your attendance. Thank you very much for your question.
Thanks.
Okay, we've got two here from Albert Street. McLaughlin, is it? Yep, sorry. Oh, actually, it's the same person.
There's two questions, they're similar.
Oh, yeah, okay, yes, please.
So my name's Vicky McLaughlin, owner-occupier of townhouse number 5 at 20 Albert Street. There's an application in for development, a planning permit for number 18 Albert Street, which is for 7, mainly, I think, 3-storey units. And there's been, they're seeking to have parking that's required reduced by 7 car parks. So my question is that while the reduction in 7 car parking spaces required is being approved on the basis of access to public transport as one of the factors, that is the number 96 tram, while public transport options are one of the grounds for developers getting an exemption based on the theory that public transport reduces car usage, what empirical assessment on car parking demand in this area was carried out, and what was the result of the assessment?
I might just get you to ask your second question and then we'll answer them.
And it's similar, so again, to do with the reduction of car parking.
Yes.
Given current residential occupants at 20 Albert Street and other neighbouring properties cannot all get parking in this area without searching down side streets and competing for highly in-demand car parking, what specific studies provide evidence that vicinity to tram routes impacts car usage?
Okay, I'm happy. All right, so we do have 2 other questions on the similar thing, but I think we will answer your questions before we move on to that questioner. Would a councillor like to answer, or will I ask the director? We'll move to the director. Kirsten Costa.
Thank you. Through the Mayor. The general practice with the assessment of car parking rates is to take into account the availability of public transport in the area. That is something which our traffic engineers advise planning officers on, and has been taken into consideration in making that recommendation. It's a general practice which is also follows through at VCAT hearings and the like as well. And it's something which is council's actively pursuing in relation to zero car parking potential for developments as well.
That doesn't really answer the question, though. Sorry, because what I understand that those assessments were done, but I thought that there was another thing that was done was empirical assessment or some anecdotal evidence that you've driven around or someone's had a look at the car parking.
I'll get the director to answer that, but then we'll move on to the next. Yes.
In terms of the empirical data, I would need to take that on notice just in terms of the detail of the supporting traffic reports that have gone with that development plan. That's quite detailed, that aspect of it.
All right, thank you. I'll move on to the next questioner. Weng Yang Lu, I think it is, at Nicholson Street. Thank you very much.
Good evening, councillors.
Good evening, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Good.
I'm from 153 Nicholson Street, which is 2 dwellings immediately to the south of the 18 Albert Street development. I will truncate my 2 questions into one for the sake of time.
Thank you.
So what do the councillors think is the visual bulk impact and the shadow impact of an 11-metre wall on the northern boundary of a small courtyard measuring 4 by 5 meters in dimension, which also served as a natural light source to the window of our bedroom. To illustrate the situation, I would like to offer the councillor a picture illustration of our courtyard.
You're welcome to come up and pass those over.
which I think a number of councillors have seen. And also I have here, our approved plan from the planning department showing two private open spaces.
Can you go to the microphone? Yes, I'm sorry, yes, sorry.
And also I have here, which is approved plan by the planning department in February this year, showing the two private open space of our rear dwelling. And just to illustrate that space, that courtyard there is not just a car space, it is a private open space as well, as stated on this endorsed plan, which is stamped by council. So I'd like to invite your opinion and your response.
Now, it's probably worth me saying at this point that I believe there will be a motion to move a deferral on this matter tonight to the Urban Planning Committee, which sits next week, as all councillors are on the Urban Planning Committee, and it will allow councillors to have a proper planning, another planning briefing prior to that. So I'm just giving you the heads up that there may be a deferral tonight.
Yes.
All right. So in saying that, would any other councillor like to answer the specifics of the question? Yes.
This is not really to do with the specifics, but moving to the Urban Planning Committee, or the UPC as we know it, gives objectors a chance to have 3 minutes to speak to their objections, and it gets considered at a different level.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
So I do feel as though objectors generally would feel that the Urban Planning Committee allows a little bit more flexibility than what the question time does at a council meeting, and so we are aware of that, and so I'm of the belief that I think the deferral will be successful. Did you want to answer anything about the specifics or not? Yep.
Just to confirm that we did speak on the phone about the potential for that to occur,
Okay.
and that would be a better means of everyone having the detail, including the car parking information as well.
All right. Thank you very much.
Great,
indeed.
thank you. So when you finish with that endorsed plan, I'd like to have a
Yeah, for sure. Of course.
Oh, you can keep the pictures. I just like the endorsed plan.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for taking me. And I welcome Councillor Bolton to our meeting. Thank you, Councillor Bolton. It's nice to have you here. All right, we'll move on to Sally Drummond, please, at Cumming Street.
Yeah, thank you. My questions are in relation to the car stacker report. Yes. Question 1. The letter from the Minister from the Department of Planning, dated the 16th of September 2016, stated that all dwellings must comply with the Residential Noise Regulations 2008. Instead, this report outlines the ongoing debate as to whether car stackers constitute other electrical equipment in Group 5 of the EPA Environmental Protection Residential Noise Regulations 2008 or fit within the State Environment Protection Policy N1, Control of Noise for Commerce, Industry and Trade. There is now confusion about the appropriate regulation applicable to a block of apartments which are residential dwellings, and owners corporations, which is a service company which looks after the communal property, common plant and equipment. The owners corporation is a not-for-profit company, but considered under one definition of commercial operation. This would mean that there are two different sets of regulations and acceptable noise levels applicable to the same building in a residential zone. This could be extended by such a definition that if there is an owners corporation, i.e. more than 3 apartments or flats, that the building is commercial and not covered by the residential noise regulations, but the SEP N1 as commercial properties, even though owned as private dwellings. This has left acoustic engineers to self-select the regulation that suits the development and not future residents or neighbours. Until this is resolved at state level, which could take up for 1 to 3 years, what actions will the council take to protect residents from having noise from car stacker impacting on their health and well-being, given that Clause 5 of DED 48/17 was specifically meant to be used by council officers to assess compliance with the EPA Residential Noise Regulations 2008 in planning applications where car stackers are considered.
Okay.
My question 2, relates to the report on car stackers that states that planning permit applications with car stackers will continue to be assessed based on recommendations of specialist acoustic consultants to guide what is the most relevant noise standard or standards in the circumstances. No particular regulations are specified to be used in such assessments, and this relies purely on one expert opinion as to what are the most relevant regulations or standards used in an application, and to provide advice on conditions applied to the planning permit. The original acoustic report submitted with the planning application for 13 Cumming Street was found to be significantly flawed by VCAT and the peer review acoustic engineer commissioned by Moreland Council. This was confirmed and rectified in the second acoustic engineer's report. What level of checking is the planning department going to undertake to ensure that incomplete and incorrect reports are not passed with future planning applications? What guarantee can be provided that the report is impartial and not just to support the developer's application? What safeguards are being provided to protect residents if Clause 5 of the DE 48/17, which states that residential noise regulations 2008 must be used, is removed, allowing the consultant to use a regulation favourable to the developer?
Okay, well, look, thank you very much, Sally. And first of all, also thank you for typing up the questions too. It's been very good to see. Look, I think it's pretty technical questions. I think I might defer to the Director if that's possible. Director, I don't know if you would you like to read the question? Yeah, right, excellent.
Thank you, through the Mayor. Thanks, Sally. This is a vexed problem because this is a gap in state government policy, essentially. Unfortunately, what happened with the last resolution of council is that a requirement to assess against the EPA's residential noise regulations has put us in a situation where they're not actually the jurisdiction of the applications. We're talking about apartments that are in commercial zones, so it's not applicable. And we're also talking about buildings that have owners' corps, and you've mentioned that in here. Yeah. Because of that, then car stackers get bundled up into this and other noise equipment. And when you start to talk about other equipment, then basically that regulation says you cannot use these things outside 10 o'clock at night. So we'd be left in a position where we would have to stop people getting their cars out of a car park to go off to night shift, for example, because that regulation says they can't use that car stacker after 10 o'clock. There could be emergencies, all sorts of things, but people would just ordinarily need to get their car out to go somewhere. So in terms of future enforcement of it as well, it's not really a realistic expectation for council to enforce that regulation, and if it's queried, it's actually not the relevant regulation. So what we've done with the recommendation for council to consider tonight is recommend something that keeps that door open, so that when the relevant regulation does come through, and we are part of the EPA's working group on the residential noise regulations and have highlighted this problem there as well, that we can take that on board when it's available. But at the moment we're left in a position where it's not the relevant tool, and hence our office's recommendation to council to just take that specific out but leave it as irrelevant policies for the moment, so that when they come on board we can apply them.
Okay, so is there going to be some provision then that car stackers must be either in a basement level or fully enclosed, that they can't be at ground in an open environment?
We'll take that as your final question, all right? I understand it's important to you, so yes.
I'm sorry, I'd need to just double check our planning scheme again, because we've put it in as an amendment in our policy. My understanding is how we've done it from memory, which is a while ago, is that they do need to be in the basement. But I'd have to check that. I'm sorry. I'll do that as we go tonight.
Yeah. That's right.
Can I take that on notice?
Yes, we will. We will. I'm happy to do that. And thank you, Sally, for the very detailed question, and thank you to the Director for an excellent answer. Okay, Helen Cracksman, sorry, from Wall Street. Hello, how are you?
Good evening, everyone. Sorry if I'm a bit shaken tonight. I had an accident with a cyclist near the Holmes Nicholson-Moreland intersection just after I picked my child up from daycare. So I'm just a little bit shaken. So if you could bear with me, that would be great. I have stood before council twice this year out of a deep, burning concern for the safety and the livability of my community. You may recall I've spoken about pedestrian safety in the Holmes Nicholson Moreland area. Thank you, that's very kind. Regarding Campbell Reserve, I detailed the increasing friction between Moreland City Football Club and other users of the reserve and the impact that increased membership at the club would have on our community. And most importantly, I asked about community consultation regarding Campbell Reserve. Councillors, please note, item 4 on tonight's report into Campbell Reserve is consultation. There is no reference to community consultation. That is because it did not occur. Why was there no community consultation?
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm not finished. I've kind of got 2 questions. If that's
Sorry,
okay.
okay, we're going. Yep, happy to keep going.
It came as a huge disappointment to receive a letter from Council advising that a planning application would be advertised with no mention of any of the other concerns raised during question time in August. Such concerns also are not listed in tonight's report. The report details work to bring Campbell Reserve up to the minimum NPL standard. Things like fences around both fields, shifting Campbell Reserve from huge green open space to 2 enclosed sporting fields. The construction works for the pavilion improvements are forecast to commence on site in December 2017 and conclude by May 2018, with closure of the field during works and recovery. That's next month. This hasn't been communicated to the people who use that park every day. Why has no one engaged the community? Was an application for a planning permit advertised? Council failed to consult with the community about Amendment C162. When this was highlighted to Council after the planning report into Amendment C160 was received, the majority of councillors voted against waiting a mere 4 weeks so that the community consultation could occur. I note there is another report on tonight's agenda where Council has investigated Council's practice into acceptance of payments under Section 173 agreements and found the practice to be sound, a shining example of good governance. What Council approved in Amendment C160 was in direct contradiction to Moreland Council's planning scheme. The soccer club didn't object to the 6 stories against the park. They were getting $250,000 to upgrade their pitch for remaining silent. The independent panel report into Amendment C160 found the traffic access and car parking requirements...
Just on that point, I don't think you can say that they received it to remain silent. I think that's... anyway, please we're not covered by defamation here, so we've got to be careful.
Certainly.
Thank you.
The independent panel report into Amendment C160 found that traffic access and car parking requirements had not been adequately addressed. Council conducted a traffic survey on Moore Street, which was not undertaken during the height of the soccer season, so it does not accurately capture the traffic on Moore Street. Now that report is being used to justify that other high-density developments will not have an adverse traffic effect on Moore Street. Where is the traffic going to go when the intensive development plan for Moore Street is undertaken and the club has more than doubled its membership? At a minimum, there's 500 people who live in the immediate area who will be, who will be impacted by development, including things like the tram track renewal that's occurred, higher density building development at least 3 sites, the shopping strip renewal program, which will impact ability just to catch a tram, and now the park is going to get ripped up and fenced off too.
Okay, thank you, Helen. Okay, I might go to Arden, is that right? The Director of Social Development.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you for your question. It's interesting because what you've asked touches on the recreation area, it touches on the planning area, and it touches on the construction area. So there may be additions that will come from my colleagues. We'll see how we go. Council upgrades pavilions many times in many places across the municipality each year. There's a rolling program of pavilion upgrades. Campbell Reserve's pavilion's upgrade time has come, and that's where this work is. We're not building a brand new pavilion. This is a site that the club has used for many years. I can't tell you how long. And the pavilion that was there was the original one. It served its time, and now it's appropriate for it to be upgraded with female change facilities, and the internal pavilion structure as well. Interestingly as well, or fortunately, there's money that's come into this project from the state government as well. So it's a unique opportunity to partner and get some council and state money working together. The works that are planned are under $1 million, and under the planning requirements, that does not trigger a planning permit process. So that's an important point to bear in mind.
And that's contrary to the information that I received after last
I don't know what information you received, but that's the planning process requirements. So your question was about why hasn't there been a consultation around the planning permit?
Yes.
The nature of the works, the scope of the works, the total amount of the works is below that $1 million threshold. Okay, so that's where that lands. There have been local interest that's been shown from members of the community who want to talk to us and the club about access during and outside of game times. And we've heard that, and I'm pleased to say we're trying to organise a meeting as early as possible, as soon as possible, maybe even next week, with a group of residents who've written to, I think, a local councillor, but also with the club. So we're trying to organise that, which will give you, if you want to be part of it, an opportunity to air your concerns, understand the works really thoroughly, because I don't think there's a fence being put between two pitches rather than around the whole perimeter, for example. So there's a few things like that that could be clarified, and if you'd like me to get your name added to the mailing list for that meeting, I'd be happy to do that.
I did find out about that meeting just this evening. I think someone saw me on the live web stream, and I think I should have probably been CC'd on it, but it was overlooked.
Okay.
But anyway, I've got a copy of it
All right.
now.
Does
It's not the work specifically. I agree that the
I
applicant does
understand.
have to
Helen,
have
you've had the question, Tom. Does any other director like to add to the
Yeah,
answer?
I just wanted to clarify in relation to the parking for Moore Street.
Yes.
Council resolved in authorising the amendment to include a specific requirement that no vehicular connection between Moore Street and Moreland Road be included. So that would address your car parking traffic problem from that extent, other than cars coming obviously all the way around if they need to do that.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you very much, Helen.
Thank you.
Councillors, could I have had a motion to extend question time to hear 3 more questions? Moved by Councillor Bolton, seconded by Councillor Davidson. Put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Okay, we've got, one of those questions is from, 2 of those questions is from one person. Louisa McMillan from Merri-Creek Management Committee. Louisa, I see you've got 2 questions here, so you might like to, however you like to handle it. How are you?
Look, the first question relates to a decision at a council meeting in October 2015.
Yes.
When council resolved to pay $71,000 to Vic Roads for the purchase of 2 parcels of surplus Vic Roads land at Leonard Street, Fawkner. And I should tell you the context of this is these parcels of land were effectively part of the Merri-Creek parklands.
Yes.
That's why I'm here.
Yes.
And part of the resolution or the agreement seemed to be that there be an agreement registered on title restricting the use of the land to be used for public open space in perpetuity. And a very simple question, was council successful in effecting this acquisition from Vic Roads for $71,000?
I might ask Mr Scott, the Director of Corporate Services.
Through the Mayor. Yes, council was, and this occurred in February 2016.
Thank you very much. The next set of questions relate to, are similar, but relate to your agenda item about another parcel of Vic Roads land at the rear of 106 McBride Street, Fawkner. And I'm hoping that if not tonight, then at some stage these questions can be answered. So the first one is whether the Victorian Department of Treasury and Finance provided council with a first right of refusal to purchase a number of parcels of Vic Roads land along Merri Creek in sometime in, I'm imagining in 2015. And if so, was one of the parcels the land known as Reserve 1, this is the Vic Roads land at the rear of 106 McBride Street, Fawkner. If one of those parcels was on offer to council for the first right of refusal, did council actively make a decision, a yes or no decision on that? And what was the decision? And if council did make an active decision on that, is it possible to explain what criteria are used in determining whether to take up the first right of refusal option, and where in council are those decisions made? Are they made at the council meeting level, or are they made somewhere else? And then finally, if this is assuming kind of yes answers to the previous ones, are you able to inform Merri-bek Management Committee of the view of the open space unit about the option of purchasing that land? Thank you. Sorry, that was a lot of questions.
No, I understand that.
Do you have those wrapped into one?
Mr. Scott? Yeah.
Thank you. Through the Mayor. Yep, can do. Thank you for these questions. With the first question, the communication that was made to council in mid-2015 came from Vic Roads. It wasn't a first right of refusal, but it initiated the discussions and negotiations that led to the proposal to do the land swap. What did occur in March 2017 was the first right of refusal from DTF, and that was in March this year. When that was received, as council had already made a decision to enter into the land swap, it didn't lead to a further report to council about the whole parcel of land. And that last point about the open space units involvement, I'd need to take on notice. And certainly this whole matter is the subject of tonight's notice of motion, and in that, if it's successful, there's an intended report to council on this issue in December.
Well, thank you very much. I realise it's been very complicated matter, so I thank you for that.
No, thank you. And thank you for the manner in which you asked the questions, Louisa. Thank you. And the final question tonight is Lieutenant Ace.
Absolutely. Thanks, John.
How are you?
I'd like to just raise an issue regarding a petition that was lodged council here in April 2017 regarding the pedestrian flashing lights request at the Derby Street Shopping Centre and a speed reduction in that zone. I've only just been informed tonight that the speed reduction has come through, so that's great. But my initial question is, why is it that, here we are in mid-November, and this is a petition that's gone forward. Why is it that I've had to face what I'd call pass the buck routine from council? I've dealt with that many people. I've got a file that's getting very, very thick. There's correspondence coming backwards and forwards. When this was initially put through the chair, and at the time, Councillor Helen Davidson, who was mayor, passed this on to Grant Thorne to deal with. So this has gone backwards and forwards. So I wanted to know why. That was the first thing. And secondly, there's an email that was sent, John, to your good self as mayor, and to all councillors, and to Nerina and to Grant. I'm still expecting an answer to that. That was on the 26th of the 10th. All I can say is that some councillors responded to that, and thank you to those that did. Those that didn't, that's what I'd call a lack of respect, actually. So I'd like to know when that is going to be answered on the 26th as well.
No worries. Thank you very much indeed, Lou. I appreciate that. All right, I'm going to go to the Chief Executive Officer for this one.
Hi, good to see you, Lou. That's right, there was an email that went from you to me on the 26th. In that email, one of the key issues was about getting a consolidated response to a whole range of the issues you raised. Earlier this week, the Director and I had spoken about it, and it is coming to you. It is not very far away, it just needed some work, basically. So I just want to give you that assurance that as early as this week we've been discussing that so that we can get that back to you. You have heard that there has been a little bit of progress, which is very good. And the other thing, just as a I guess a convention, is that if there has been an email, and I guess it was directed really at me, that I responded and let people know that we will provide that response. So it may be that other councillors felt that we were already responding to it. So I just want to explain that that's a bit of a convention in terms of rather than getting lots of responses from everyone, so that we can give you one response. That's really why I wanted to approach it that way, because I understood that you had had some different interactions with different people. So we're just trying to make it one back to you and covering all the issues that you're after.
Oh, Nerina, that covers the second email, but they all received an email initially, yeah?
Okay, fair enough.
So, I mean, those that responded, no, I know who they are, and I don't want to put the others in
No,
any
no, thank you, Lord.
I just think you've got respect up on your board.
Yeah, no, the good news is you're not far off from getting a detailed response. Now, councillors, with your permission, I might take the question from the gentleman here. He wasn't aware of the process of writing a question, so I might take that as our final question with your permission.
I'm speaking for 69 residents who signed, David Callaghan, signed a petition for more trees in an area, Union Street, Millwood Street, Hull Street, and also for the local residents association, which meets tomorrow night.
And can you remind me what the petition was to do with, sir?
The number of the petition, the previous council has the list of the names and the addresses of all the 69 people.
Just what was it about those?
Why hasn't the council responded
to that petition?
To the petition? When I saw one of the residents, an older resident, she said, "It's no good, David, the council is too corrupt." Because 40 years ago, residents unanimously, according to her, tried to stop the development, and the development, which is quite awful, went ahead, and the developer called the moorland residents peasants. Now, I said, no, the council is not corrupt, they will respond. Now, 18 months later, there simply hasn't been a response. Instead, there's been an insult. Where there are, the council workers went through, where there are 4 trees missing, 1 bush which will grow to 1 metre high when it's fully grown has been planted, where there are 6 trees missing in the middle of Millwood Street, 3 trees have been planted, and none on the side where there are 5 trees, 2 of which were cut down by the council themselves. Now,
and were the petitioners asking for more street trees? Or
yes.
Okay.
And most residents have just give up. But I won't give up. I'll write about it and publish in a prominent place.
I promise you, David, we're going to follow that up. I can promise you in this week, we're going to follow that up for you, okay? I'm sorry that's happened, and I assure you that we will follow that up. We have your name now. And
you have the petitions.
Yes, and James is over here, our director. He's going to take a couple of details off you, and I can assure you we are going to follow that up this week.
Yes, and also just PS, the man on the corner of Millwood, Haller and Grafton Street said one of those damn things, lollipop plants in Grafton Street are going to take out the eye of someone one day because they're pruned each year and they're just the eye height of an adult eye.
And the Deputy Mayor wants to have a response too, and then we're going to finish questions.
I just know a couple of things. We've recently got a whole new urban forest strategy together, and you're right, and Lou can attest to this, things do take an amazingly long time in this place sometimes, and I can tell you one thing first about the lollipop trees, is that the guy who's been employed to study all of the trees in the city and work out why on earth there are so many callistemons and how we'll have not so many more, looked at the lollipop trees, and he's addressing the pruning issue so that the idea is to grow them taller and then into a big square so that they can provide the shade they need but not take out night.
But they won't grow
Just let me finish. We had a similar problem with them along Lygon Street. And the other thing that I just want to say to you before you speak to James about organising what will happen with the trees on Millwood and Heller Street is that no more planting will happen until the weather cools again in sort of May towards autumn next year. But I can assure you that we are endeavouring to plant a lot more trees, and now that once again you've brought this to our attention, we can definitely address this area.
Yeah. And the second question...
I'm going to leave it there, David. All right, I'll get you to talk to James now because I think we're
the second question is really
important. I'm going to leave that.
Because I'm going to write it down.
I'm sorry, David. I'm going to leave it. All right. I've let you because you didn't write down a question. I've given you an opportunity, but I'm going to leave it now.
Speak at the next
Thank you very much, David.
Please,
I'm sure.
If I can.
I'm serious. No, I'm serious in saying thank you so much, sir. I appreciate you, and I appreciate we will act on that. I apologise on Council's behalf. Could I have a motion, councillors? I'm going to move that concludes question time, and so we move on to on-notice motions.
Yep.
We've got a notice motion there for October 2017 council meeting. Thank you, Councillor Davidson.
Yep. And also just to note that the meeting dated the 11th October, there's also the on-notice item 9/17. And that's been responded to. Okay. So just for noting.
And for noting the both of those. Thank you so much indeed. That's the mover with the extra notice of 9/17. Could I have a seconder for that? Councillor Bood. If there's no discussion, I'll ask for all those in favour. Against, declare that carried. We've got Mayor and Councillor reports now. A Mayor and Councillor report, a report on the activities of councillors in relation to events, activities, meetings or other functions that councillors have attended between council meetings. All reports by Mayor and councillors will appear in the minutes of this meeting. I will now ask each councillor in turn if they wish to provide a report. Would you like to start, Councillor Bolden? Would you like to do that?
Have you mentioned the equal marriage?
Yes, we have. We had a...
Okay, I won't... just maybe one thing that I would like to report, apart from the wonderful result in terms of marriage equality today, is that there is a site in Hilton Street, Glenroy. It's a site of an old, a former Aboriginal school which was shut down in 2011. Council has been supporting the local community and local Indigenous community in being able to win that site back for a First Nations community hub, which will be, the idea of it will be inclusive, it'll be focused around Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, but they also want to welcome in the surrounding community as well. And so now there is, the land has been leased to the council and then to the local Wurundjeri, but now there's beginnings to some architects have been employed to work out sort of concept plans and so forth so that we can start to bring this to fruition. So this will be something really quite important for the northern part of Moreland. It's obviously not at the point of, being built. We don't have permanent control of the land, but it's things are moving forward with this project, and so this is actually going to be really great thing. It means people don't have to go to places far away to have an experience of Aboriginal culture. So it'll be the first of its kind in Melbourne. And so I think that's that's probably the main thing I want to report on, apart from a very successful Faulkner Festa this year. I think numbers were down a bit on previous years, but certainly I think it was a great event this year, in particular in terms of the engagement of young people. And there are a range of all sorts of different issues being raised. There's the beginning of a Faulkner Food Bowls project, but also we got a fantastic response at the campaign for toxic-free Faulkner around this toxic site near the Merri Creek. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Davidson?
No, nothing to report.
Councillor Bood.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to alert people to a couple of things that I've been to recently. The most important for me and exciting, because I got to step in for the Mayor and read a beautiful speech that someone called Judy had written, was the launch of the Libraries After Dark project in Glenroy. So, as everyone would know, we've sort of been fighting, or advocating for harm minimisation against the effects of pokies. And the Libraries After Dark program is quite a remarkable thing that's been developed by a woman called Councillor Susan Rennie, who's at Darebin, to enable spaces for people to go to who might be sort of at a loss after dark and end up wandering into places like pokey dens. And this is just an opportunity where people can go and either be with other people or just on their own, but spend time as an alternative to these places where pokies happen. The Faulkner Festival, I agree, was a fantastic event, and it's always a hot day, but this year they didn't run out of ice cream, which is exciting for me. I've been to a Disability Advisory Committee meeting, and I just wanted to draw attention to quite a remarkable piece of work that some of the officers are putting together, which is called the Brunswick Music Festival Venue Accessibility Descriptions. So there's a whole lot of work going into finding out exactly what venues and what percentage of venues are fully accessible. This is actually a response to an issue that was raised with the council about accessibility, because it's really great to have a music festival, but until you've tried to access one in a chair with wheels, you just don't understand what the implications are. And so I'm really impressed with this piece of work by these officers, and I'm looking forward to seeing that evolve. Thank you.
Councillor.
Thanks. So I've just got three things to touch on. So thank you to the residents who keep coming to my ward meetings. For those that don't know, I run a monthly ward meeting up in the Northwest Ward. It's been at Pascoe Vale Pool for most of this year, but next year I'll be looking to move it up towards Gowan Bray and Glenroy, so try and rotate it a little bit more. So I just wanted to let residents know about that. I also took part in two fantastic visioning workshops over the last few days. So one with MEFL as a result of, so that's for those that don't know, it's the Moreland Energy Foundation. What we're doing is we're accelerating our vision and our efforts to move forward to a net zero carbon emission future by 2040. And so what that day consisted of was bringing in lots of amazing people from all over, not just this municipality, but all over the city, to really talk about things like stationary energy, local energy trading, community energy, looking forward to 100% renewables, looking forward to transport. How are we going to have a smart city of the future? And I really wanted to put a message out for those that would consider themselves an expert in energy, in waste, in transport, in advocacy. There's still positions open for people that want to get involved to really put your expertise into that and really drive our vision moving forward. And the last thing that I'd like to touch on was that I had a fantastic visioning workshop at the Brunswick Business Incubator, and that was I found that a really great day yesterday, where we were talking about the potential partnerships that we could have moving forward, really looking at Brunswick as a future startup hub. So really looking forward to actually connecting people coming out of university and really incubating them to actually say, you don't need to go work for somebody else, you can create your own job and your own future, really. And so part of that process, and so for people who might be experts in change makers or maker spaces or have any experience with incubators or accelerator programs, please get in touch. I'm sure our economic development team would really appreciate your input. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Riley. Councillor Tapanos?
No, none from me.
Councillor Yildiz. Just a couple from me. Last Friday night I was fortunate to attend the launch of a book by one of the members of the Coburg Historical Society, Dr. Cheryl Griffin. The book is entitled Coburg State School Boys Go to War, and it outlines the stories of 100 boys who went to primary school across the road here and that went to the First World War. It outlines exactly where they were living at the time, exactly what house they were living, and their circumstance, their parents' names, etc. It's an outstanding book. I was unaware that over 1,200 Coburg residents went to the First World War, and over 100 of them, I think over 100 went to Coburg Primary School, which was then called Coburg State School. On Saturday morning, I went to Remembrance Day services at Pascoe Vale RSL, and also to a community police forum, which I appreciate Councillor Riley doing the opening address as I was at the Remembrance ceremony, but was able to take part in question and answer sessions with the Victoria Police, and I thank them for their community forum that took place there. On Sunday, at another range of activities, including the Faulkner Festa and also making a presentation to a 100-year-old resident. Yesterday had two different things. One was the turning of the sod of the Milliston Hall, and the beginning of the end, if you like, of a great community campaign. And I congratulate councillors around the table here for their efforts on reaching that milestone. But I particularly congratulate the community on their efforts to ensure that that's got to this point. And then I went to Broadmeadows Rotary, which, although it's called Broadmeadows Rotary, it's based in Glenroy. And I had a forum there with the member for Calwell, Maria Van Mapaloo, a councillor from Hume, Councillor Shelley, the Mayor of Hume, Councillor Jeff Porter, and myself, about the different initiatives that were taking place in Glenroy. One thing that came up on that night that I thought was worth sharing, we talk about the power of the individual. Rotary International have been involved in a large project of eradicating polio since 1985. What I didn't know until last night was that was started by a man in Nambour, Queensland, at a local Rotary meeting, who put that forward as something that Rotary should engage in. He got acceptance there and went to the State Council, acceptance at the Australian Forum, and then International Rotary. Since that time, Rotary have spent $1.7 billion in immunising 2.5 billion children in the world. And in 1985, something like 8,000 new polio cases were pronounced every year. That's down to 16 last year, and all of them were in Afghanistan or Pakistan. They are within a year or two of eradicating polio from the face of the earth, and from the beginning efforts of one person, one Australian man from Queensland. I think it's talk about the power of one. Anyway, so we'll move on to officer reports, and we begin with planning and economic development, and we begin with DED 9517, residential areas, proposed amendment C171 to rezone parts of residential growth zone. Do I have a mover? Councillor Riley. Do I have a second? Do I have a second? Seconder, Councillor Martin. Would you like to speak to a Councillor Riley?
Yes, thank you. Mayor Kavanagh. Thank you everyone for attending. This is the first report for this evening. It's a detailed report, and I have to say it took me probably 2 or 3 reads before I actually completely comprehend what this was trying to achieve. However, I'd like to sum it up in the fact that what we have in our city is about a dozen neighbourhood centres dotted around the city, and they have particular zoning that developments that can happen in those centres. But through some of the strategic work that we've been doing over the years and the feedback we've had from our communities, we realised that there are areas of these neighbourhood centres that are inappropriate for 4-storey development. So this report essentially is addressing many of those concerns. If you go to the map at the back of the end of this report, it's probably the easiest way to actually get your heads around where these areas are and how much of the city is covered by this proposal to actually bring some of those areas into what's the general residential zone under Schedule 2. So it'll be effectively just like any other general residential zone, and we're a maximum of 3 storeys in those areas. Now, just to further add a bit of complication to this, we've actually proposed this amendment under C159 as appears in the report, and we can't action this particular report until the minister's decided and made some resolutions around C159. So the important thing is that this strategic work's ready to roll, and as soon as we get a result of that, we can then see whether and how much of it's been addressed by the minister, and if not, we can then start to address it through this work. So I would like to commend the officers for all their preparation and work on this, and look forward to the outcomes of the C159, and then just how much we need to proceed with this C173 proposal. Thanks.
Councillor Martin?
No, I think
no. Would any other speakers? Thank you, Councillor Tapanos.
Thank you, Mayor Kavanagh. Just to point out how pleased I am to see this work beginning. It is great. It's always good news for our community when we are able to implement more restrictive zones and more restrictive planning policies. So there was significant angst when we did consultation on this many years ago in regards to the growth zone. And I must say that the rules have changed on us effectively. The goalposts were shifted. So whilst we anticipated growth zones of a maximum of 3 stories, the schedule was then subsequently changed and we had 4 stories and the mandatory cap was removed and it could have been even more. I don't think that was ever the intention at the time, and it certainly wasn't what the community had signed up for. So it is just right that we scale that back and remove these areas from the growth zone and put them in a general residential zone. That would provide greater certainty to the community, it would provide greater protection, and it is a positive move. And it would decrease the amount of growth zone in our city to barely 1 or 2%. So I hope that this is able to be supported tonight, but also I hope that it gets a favourable response from the Minister and we can get this implemented as soon as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Are there any further speakers on this item? Being no further speakers, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Next report we have to consider is DED 9617, Victorian Cladding Task Force Pilot Audit Update.
I'll move that.
Move that officer recommendation, Councillor Bolton, seconded by Councillor Davidson. Like to speak to it, Councillor Bolton?
Yes, I am very pleased to see this report coming back. I think it is, well, it's quite alarming that there are so many buildings in Moreland that warrant further investigation. Moreland has already, as one of the councils that's participating in the Victorian Cladding Task Force, and this is about the flammable cladding that is on so many buildings throughout Melbourne. And I've sort of been taking this issue up over this last couple of years since the fire at Docklands. So council did a visual inspection of 155 buildings, and the Cladding Task Force has asked council to further investigate 123 buildings. And what would be interesting to know with those buildings, because I imagine most of them wouldn't be higher than 8 stories, and developers are not required to put sprinklers in buildings that are no higher than 8 stories or 25 metres under current laws in Australia. So I think this is really vitally important work. I mean, the council officer's recommendation or notes that this is incredibly time consuming and is a drain on council financially, and it's seeking recovery of the costs from the state government. But I think this is a really, really important issue because there have been terrible fires in buildings with cladding all over the world, and even in a low-rise building, so if you're even in a 2-storey building with flammable cladding on it, if you're someone who's got a disability or an older person who's maybe moving a bit slower, it actually isn't as easy as you think to get out of a building really quickly, because these cladding is just so flammable. So anyway, I am pleased to see this coming back. I wish there weren't any buildings that needed investigation, but I think it is really important that we try and keep the community safe and not have any Grenfell disasters happening in Moreland.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Davidson?
Yeah, I'd just briefly like to add that it is, as Councillor Bolton said, extremely important that we address this, and the fact that council is seeking costs to be recouped from the state government is very important, because the state legislation is the one that governs this particular area, not council legislation. So that's an important distinction to make between what council can control and what the state can control.
Are there any further speakers at this item? Being no further speakers, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Next report is DED 9717, City Development Activity Report, September quarter 2017. Do I have a mover? Councillor Yildiz, moved by Councillor Yildiz, seconded by Councillor Martin. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Yildiz? Councillor Martin?
No.
No. Any speakers to the report? There being no speakers, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. The next report we have is DED 9817, 18 Albert Street, Brunswick East, Development Plan and Planning Permit Application, MPS 21644.
I'd like to move an alternative recommendation to what we have up there tonight, and that is one that we refer the report to the Urban Planning Committee for its resolution at the 29th of November 2017 meeting.
Thank you. And you've got something else as well.
And also, two, that we refer all future development plan decisions to the Urban Planning Committee for its resolution. And if I have a moment, I can talk to it.
No, I will take a seconder for that because it's not just a deferral, but it's got a couple of other matters to it too. So I won't view it as a procedural motion as such. So seconded by Councillor Abood. And would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to it. So essentially, the reason why this has come back to us is because originally, not all the councillors were on the Urban Planning Committee. Originally, there was only a couple of councillors, and so what we're doing now, moving forward, is saying that we essentially have 2 council meetings a month. The Urban Planning Committee meeting is the appropriate place for this type of report. It allows the residents to actually send your emails out to us in advance, so we can have a look at it. We can have a briefing from the officers, and then going forward, what we'd like to see is all the planning sit within that planning meeting. And then we won't have to deal with it in the chamber without being briefed across all the issues.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Abood?
Nothing more to add, thank you.
Are there any further speakers? There being no further speakers, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Next report is DED 9917, Car Stackers Local Policy / Local Law. Do I have a mover? A mover, yes, Councillor Tapper.
I'll move the officer recommendation dot point 1, 2 and 3.
Right, Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Tapanos. So 1, 2 and 3, and so you're not considering 4, and you're seconding that, Councillor Bolton, you say? All right, no worries. Councillor Tapanos.
Thank you. Mayor, councillors, we heard a lot tonight from members of the gallery, as we have many previous occasions, in regards to this dilemma about car stackers and the potential noise that they emit, particularly if they're above ground. And this has certainly been the subject of at least 1, if not 2, decisions of the Urban Planning Committee in regards to dealing with applications, and no doubt in the future there would be significantly more applications seeking to have car stackers that are not enclosed in underground car parks per se. So it is something that we must grapple with, and it's something that is not just unique to Moreland, but right across the state. And it's very clear to me that we don't have adequate planning provisions currently to deal with how we assess the noise emitting from these machines. But I do believe that we need to be consistent with our previous decisions and assess the noise being emitted from with the most stringent rules that are available, and those are those are EPA guidelines. I think in the absence of planning provisions, we need to consider those. To do otherwise would be opening the floodgates potentially, and potentially creating a situation where we see more and more car stackers without adequate sort of assessments being done based on noise. I do know that there is a lot of concern in the community, and I think it's right for council to respond by taking this step and reaffirming effectively its decision of previous councils to undertake that assessment against those EPA guidelines. So I think that not only should we continue to do that process, but we should pursue with the Minister actually embedding those guidelines into planning regulations. So not just Moreland applications, but right across the state, we could have consistent planning policy, and we could have assessments on applications based on those. And I must admit that this was something that the Minister himself recommended to Council in a letter that came, I think, about 6 months ago, that we should have a look at going down this path. Now, I think that that is certainly an option that was raised in the ministerial letter, and something that we should continue to take up. So for those reasons, I encourage councillors to support this report and those 3 motions without dot point 4.
Yeah,
Yes.
just want to make a procedure. I want to foreshadow that I want to move point 4 separately.
So, okay. Okay. Councillor Bolton.
I'll leave my
Okay.
speech.
All right. So at this point, are there any further discussion on this item? So at this point, we'll be voting on the first three, and maybe you could move the fourth point, even if this is successful, and see what comes of that. Okay? All right. All right. So at the moment, we're going to be voting on points 1, 2 and 3, and then Councillor Riley, you can move point 4 after that if you so desire. Okay.
I'm happy to speak. Can I just speak?
Separate to this motion?
Yeah, I think so. I think...
because it's been left out rather than taken away.
It hasn't... Yeah.
It would be 2 motions.
Yeah, right, we'll make it 2 motions. So at the moment, we're moving points 1, 2 and 2. You might like to speak to this item then, if you like, Councillor, and you can allude to, if you like, to as why you're supporting point 4. But in essence, we'll be voting on points 1, 2 and 3 in the first instance.
Thank you. I rise to support this motion and to flag that I support the full motion. I know community members have approached us about the concerns around item 4 and the impacts that will have in the competition between the role of council in this area and the role of the state government and the EPA with regard to the provisions around noise and whether they are affected, as some of the questions raised earlier, so whether they are covered by commercial provisions or by planning and residential provisions of noise. So it's quite a vexed area, and I think that the officers have actually done a sterling job in trying to bring all this together. It's work that we're very pleased that the community have raised and put pressure on about to get some clarity. And as the questioners have said earlier, this whole area is reliant on the state government to do some work, and unfortunately I don't know why we have to wait 3 years to get this resolved. And then the pressure comes back on us as council not doing its jobs properly. So I just want to foreshadow that even though the people from the Brunswick West Association are wanting to see that we not actually consider point 4, I think that it's important that we do, because it's actually looking to try and provide a way of having acoustic reports produced when applications do come up, and that they are the responsibility of the proponent to provide that. So the residential component of so I'm just going to read this, then foreshadow that this is coming back to us for the next discussion, that this resolution is replaced with the council supersedes item 5 from the resolution of DED 4817 on the 14th of June 2017, so that this resolution is replaced with a resolution that an acoustic report be required for planning application with a residential component, or which are in a residential zone or directly above a residential zone, which have above ground stackers to inform the assessment of the application, the applicable noise standards and permit conditions. To not have that is going to leave the council open to a whole range of consequences. So I just want to foreshadow that we need to consider this in the next motion, and I support the motions as presented in items 1, 2 and 3.
All right, thank you very much. So we're going to vote on items 1, 2 and 3 at this point. So that's the motion before us. Moved by Councillor Tabernos, seconded by Councillor Bolton. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Now, Councillor Riley, I assume you'd like to move point 4?
Yes.
Do I have a seconder for Councillor Riley's motion?
I'm happy to second it.
Councillor Abood.
I've already effectively...
I think you've pretty well
spoken to this, yes. And I would welcome further debate. Thanks.
Right. Any further debate on point 4? Okay. I'll put that to the vote. If there's no further debate, I'm going to put that to the vote. So we're looking at point 4. All those in favour of point 4? Against? That's carried as well. Okay. So now all 4 points have been endorsed.
Those have a division on that?
Yes, you're welcome to have a division. Can those who were in favour of point 4 please raise their hands again for the notices of a division? So we have Councillor Riley, Councillor Martin, Councillor Kavanagh, Councillor Abood and Councillor Davidson. And for against we have Councillor Yildiz, Councillor Tabernos and Councillor Bolton. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to the next item, DED 117 Flores Street Florence, I should say, Florence Street pop-up park. Do I have a mover for that item? Councillor Riley. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Abood. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Riley?
Yes, just briefly. I want to thank officers for bringing this report to us. This is the pop-up park was a motion that came from our April meeting earlier this year, and unfortunately, due to an objection by one of the businesses in that street, it's not feasible to actually implement the pop-up park, which would actually, it's a dead-end street that goes into the upfield railway line on Florence Street there, and we had a motion that council supported to install that. Unfortunately, we won't be able to do that. This motion continues to work towards that, so that once that site, which has business occurring there each day, is developed, and it's foreshadowed to be developed and sold, that it will actually, once that occurs, that then the planning for that pop-up park will be, some of that funding we've already allocated will be done, and the planning will be there ready to roll that out once those that site is developed and the residents move into there, so they can actually enjoy a greater open space in Florence Street. In the meantime, this report is actually suggesting we acquire some parklet infrastructure where we do take over car parks, and we create small open spaces, and businesses can actually do this temporarily for up to 6 months, or they can do it for long term. So this is a compromise situation, and the community are aware of it, and it's just unfortunate for legal reasons and risk reasons we couldn't implement the pop-up park at this stage. Thank you.
Yep, Councillor Good.
Yeah, just not too much to say. Just wanted to draw attention that to the fact that the notice of motion was actually the result of a petition that was received from the community, and so I guess that it'll be a great day when the development that needs access at this point is complete, and both of the buildings at the end of the street can enjoy for the street to be closed off and to have this open space. I mean, it's no secret that the South Ward doesn't enjoy the same benefits as the North East Ward that I represent in terms of open space, and we're doing everything that we can to resolve that for the residents who live in the south end of the city.
Thank you, Councillor Abood. Any other discussion? There being no further discussion, I'll put that to vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. Next item is DED 10117, utilising Section 173 agreements to secure developer contributions. Councillor Riley has his hand, so it is moved by Councillor Riley. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Martin. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Riley?
Yes, thank you. This is a really important report, because there's been some misunderstanding about the use of Section 173 agreements in our council and how they're used. And was even one of the questions this evening was around how some of those funds are being applied at the Moreland Road Reserve. What's the Campbell Reserve? This is an example of where money comes to the community. It doesn't come, in a sense, it doesn't come to the council. It comes to the council on behalf of the community, and we invest it in upgrades for things like Campbell Reserve. But there are other examples in the city where we've had childcare centres funded by developers and other infrastructure. At the end of the day, it's a transparent process, and if people need to get their heads around that, I'd suggest you read this report, because what we're trying to do is to get some clarity around the application of these agreements. Some people have actually been bold enough to suggest that these are a form of bribery, or that there's some sort of lack of transparency in our city, and it's something that I certainly feel very uncomfortable about, and I'd like people to be aware that in fact these agreements are across the state. They're not something that Moreland just does, they happen all around, and that these funds are invested on your behalf as much as they are for councils, and they're a way of getting some value add from those larger developments that the city is undertaking. There have been further discussions with my fellow councillors around how we can actually explain Section 173s to our community, and have like a note on our webpage that actually gives some more clarity to that. We've explored the possibility of having policy around this, but in fact, if the catch-22 is we actually have a policy on a Section 173, then you seem to actually be favouring how you're going to spend those monies and how you're going to, that you're actually stipulating, putting conditions on those, and it's better not to have those conditions because then you can actually leave the expenditure and how those funds are applied in a more transparent way. So it sounds like a catch-22 or a contradiction of terms, but what we're actually seeking is to get some more clarity so people understand how they work and why we don't have a policy on it, but that we actually use those funds to improve our community when we have major developments happening in our community. So it's a really important piece of work that we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Martin?
No.
No. Any other? Councillor Bolton?
I've got some comments about this because I think council obviously needs to enter these agreements, but I think there are some, or whenever you've got something connected with private enterprise, you can sometimes have situations where there is pressure, and certainly one of the rezonings that's referred to in this document, there was a lot of pressure from the business people who wanted their land rezoned. There was a lot of pressure on councillors at that particular point in time. I actually think the report is good because it actually does start to explain some of the processes and where decisions are made. So I think it actually is very good that council officers have prepared this report. But I think, I think we shouldn't necessarily say these are the ants pants agreement because, I think obviously we need to enter these agreements, but, there can be at times when it might not always work in our interests. One example, which is referred to in the report, is regarding the Coles rezoning on Gaffney Street. And I actually think the council didn't get a good deal out of this because I tried to book the community meeting room that Coles pledged to provide to council 12 months after Coles was fully up and operating, and they still hadn't relinquished the key to council to be able to access that meeting room. Then it turned out that they managed to change through the planning panel, convert this from a community meeting room to a community office space, which you can only access after hours 2 nights a week. They really tried to, put a lot of pressure on council not to take over this space, which had been agreed to. So, I guess what I'm saying is we don't need to exaggerate how wonderful these agreements are when they're a necessity, and I think it's good that there's some transparency with the explanation of how they're entered into and some of the examples of the sorts of agreements, but they're not always wonderful.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Any other discussion on this report? Councillor Davidson.
I'll just say a few words. In the report, I think it's very important to note the recommendation, and it says that where this kind of contribution is made, that it's preferred that negotiation about the contribution by the developer to the particular site is made at the start of the process, prior to public expedition, but no later than the consideration of submissions by residents. So that's out in the public, so that those terms can be really cemented and really brought to the public to say, is this what you want? Is it in your best interest? And then council will determine that. And council can always say, no, we don't want that. So the idea of putting in our own conditions where perhaps a key isn't working, and those examples that were provided by Councillor Bolton, which I'm not aware of, those things can be eliminated through our understanding of what those conditions are and through the consultation with the community, by the community telling us this is what we want.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Any further discussion on this report? Councillor Taffels.
I don't want to repeat my speech of 9th August when we were last discussing this, but it's no surprise to me that the report has actually been a good example of some of the very positive contributions that have been made in the community. And I think the most simple way to explain it is this. These developers, when they receive a rezoning, you're basically adding zeros at on the value of their property. They should be paying. They should be contributing above and beyond to contribute to the community as far as infrastructure in the local area, greater open space improvements in the local area, amenities for the local area, because they are making so much money from that rezoning. So it would be a real disservice to our community if we prevented our officers from negotiating these deals. And I, for one, have never thought that decisions are tainted. I've never thought that a decision was made yay or nay based on a contribution. But this contribution was always just an additional sum above and beyond the requirements to really reflect the additional value and the additional financial benefit these developers were getting. So I'm glad to see that we are noting that, we're putting it on the record, and I'm glad that we've probably undertaken the exercise as well, because I think it's good to have it there in the public document for community members to read and appreciate exactly the hard work that goes into these and the community benefit that is derived from them.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Any further discussion? Being no further discussion, put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. We move on to organisational development now. EMOD 1017, Council Action Plan 1718, and Councillor Abood is on her feet to move the motion. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Martin. Councillor Abood.
Thank you. I'd just like to move the officer recommendation here. I really want to commend this piece of work, and I encourage anyone, especially if you're slightly interested in council, to read the whole thing. We had put together with the help of the executive and quite a few of the other spare bodies around the place a really ambitious council plan. And I think that, and I probably mean spare bodies because I'm sure everyone had a hand in it. A very ambitious council plan, and we're coasting along. We're smashing the targets, which I think is really impressive, and it actually reflects on the efficiency of what's going on back here. There are a few delays. The NDIS has been a little bit delayed, our goals there, because we're making sure that we drill down to the detail, but as across the board, we're about halfway through that work in terms of each council rolling them out. So we're learning from the early mistakes, and hopefully we'll be able to get it right in terms of all of that complicated work. I think also Oxygen is a little bit behind, and as the councillor responsible for youth, which I share with Councillor Tapanos, I can say that the Oxygen Committee are very, very excited about what's happening, and everything's on the site, it just hasn't been opened yet. And also the meeting procedural local law is a little bit behind schedule, but I think that's because we're putting quite a lot of energy into the local laws as well. So there's the people that are involved in that work have been peddling pretty hard. So I just encourage anybody to read this pretty remarkable report.
Thank you, Councillor Abood. Councillor Martin?
No.
Any further discussion on the report? Being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. We move on to corporate services. DCS 6517 Financial Management Report for the period ending 30th of September 2017. Do I have a mover? Councillor Abood. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Martin. Councillor Abood, would you like to speak to it?
No, I don't have any.
Councillor Martin. Any discussion on this report? Being no discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. Next report we have is DCS 6617, Proposed Lease of Land, South Street, Hadfield, Hydrogen Fuel Project. And we've got a couple of excited councillors of Councillor Martin and Councillor Davidson. So moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Davidson. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Kevin. We are very excited by this project. I don't know if you can tell, but this
you can tell.
This is really exciting for Moreland. This is our for those that don't know, we're creating a hydrogen facility in Hadfield, and what we're going to be doing there is filling up our garbage trucks with hydrogen going forward. So we're looking to the future. We're looking at new technology, and it's going to be designed here in Moreland. So I believe it's an Australian first. I don't know if it's a world first, but it is.
I'll claim it.
I will claim that it's a world first, but it is really exciting, and the partnership with HTU is really exciting. So we are looking to the future here in Moreland. It's not something that you typically see from local councils, but you do see it in Moreland. So very excited, and really hope that this goes through. And also as well, there's also an education centre in there, which I'm really excited about, that hopefully we get that built as well.
Thank you. Councillor Davidson.
Look, I won't say anything but to echo Councillor Martin's excitement in this, and to note that this will be coming to the Urban Planning Committee if there are submissions to this application. I think it has elements of it world first in nature just by the project itself. The partnership with H2U, I want to thank our CEO, Narina Di Lorenzo, for really forging ahead with that, and the officers that have been involved with this as well. It's something that I'm extremely proud of, and growing up in Glenroy, Hadfield, it's something that I think will really benefit the area, and I'm excited to see it develop.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Abood.
This is really fantastic, and it's such an exciting thing, and sometimes we talk about not wanting to set a precedent in this room, but today I think we definitely want to set a precedent. The most exciting thing for me is out of a conversation I had which indicated that potentially we might have a scenario, because I'm a little bit obsessed with battery-powered gardening tools at the moment, where we could have the open space team doing parks maintenance, where they actually plug in their batteries to the truck and charge their batteries on the site, so that they're fully organised and don't even have to travel back somewhere to pick up a battery with a charge in it, or like this just really opens up some doors, and I think it's really exciting.
Thank you, Councillor Abood. Any other councillors like to contribute to this item? Being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. Next report we need to consider is DCS 6717 Governance Report, November 2017. Councillors, before we consider this item, I'd like you to table attachments 3 and 4, which you have in front of you on the green sheets. The first page is basically attachment 3, and the subsequent pages are attachment 4. They're the council office holders and the councillors responsible for and committee appointments. So in moving this report, that's what we're moving as well. So if you need to take a moment to have a browse through that, it has been published in the past, except for the final one regarding MAP.
I'm happy to move.
You're happy to move?
Yep.
Yep. Councillor Tapanos is happy to move, and Councillor Abood is happy to second. Anyone like to talk to the items? Okay, I'll put it to the vote. Yeah, go on.
I just wanted to commend the Mayor on his diligence at wrangling us all to get involved in this document. There was a bit of toing and froing, and I think the idea of getting it all resolved and tucking it in here is a very good idea.
Thank you very much. Thank you. If no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. City infrastructure now we move on to DCI 5817, Bicycle Strategy Implementation, delivering strategy actions before 2021. And Councillor Martin is on his feet to move. Maybe you can...
I would like to move an amendment to the officer recommendation.
So we'll have a listen to your motion before I ask for a seconder.
Yep. So in essence, it's quite a long motion there on the board. I won't read it out for everyone in the audience, but in essence, what I'm asking and what I'm putting forward here is that we look to option 2, which is not only achieve our short-term targets, but also achieve our top 10 priorities as a council by 2021. So, and the reasoning, I can go into, if I have a seconder, I can go into some of the reasoning behind that.
Okay. You're comfortable to second, Councillor Riley? Yep.
Yeah, so...
You can now, Councillor Martin.
So in essence, that my reasoning behind this is with these bicycle strategies, we're forever waiting. We're forever waiting for something to happen. And what I'm signalling here is that we want to see these things happen. We want to see them happen sooner. We got the census data come out a couple of weeks ago that says that Brunswick has got the highest amount of commuters by bicycle in the entire country. And so what we need to do is we need to extend that. We need to extend that up to Coburg. We need to extend it. We need to connect these links that have been missing for so long.
Where'd you get that statistic?
It's in the census data, Oscar. I can send it to you afterwards. And so what we're doing here is we're not going it alone. We are asking the state government to say, hey, we care about active transport and we want to put in with you. We want to pitch in. You know, next year's a state election. Let's talk. Let's get everyone together on the same page, and let's fund these projects. Let's build these connections. You know, let's finish lighting the upfield bike path, the Craigieburn shared path, the Sages Road to Western Ring Road, upgrading Merri Creek Trail. Let's do all of these projects, and let's do them in our council term. So, in essence, that's what I'm asking for tonight, and I hope that my fellow councillors support my enthusiasm for really moving forward on cycling and not deferring it to the next council to deal with.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Martin. Councillor Riley, you're the second. Would you like to speak to it?
I'll reserve the right. Yeah.
No worries. Yep, Councillor Bird.
I'd just like to reiterate what Councillor Martin said, because there was a little bit of disbelief. Brunswick has the highest number of bike riders in Australia. Now, all of those people ride south into the city, and that's because we don't have the infrastructure for them to come up north. So it makes actually good economic sense for the northern end of the city. And as a North East Ward councillor and representing Fawkner and all the way back down to Albion Street, I say that these projects are super important as well. And one specific one that does depend on some funding from the state government and will be quite spectacular when it's finished is the upfield bike path where it continues through the Fawkner Cemetery. Now, it doesn't make, it's not the most obvious thing to go and hang around in a cemetery, but the Campbellfield Creek meets the Merlinston Creek in that area, and both of the little creeks come babbling down where they start is, or not where they start, but one thing that they pass is Amalgam Water Retarding Basin, which has a whole lot of natural habitat, and the Fawkner Cemetery is up for promoting some of its grounds as beautiful places to ride through or maybe even hang out. So I think it'll be great when we can really highlight what's happening in the north end of the city by finishing, at the very least, some of these projects that head up.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. Councillor Bolton.
Yes, I'd like to wholeheartedly support this motion because I think, I think Brunswick has led the country in numbers of cyclists in some years. I don't think this is a new thing. I think if you go back over old statistics, it's that's been the case for some time. But I think one thing I've noticed, just purely anecdotally, so it's not statistical, is there also a lot more people in the north who are riding bikes, whereas maybe even 4 years ago you hardly ever saw anyone riding a bike in Glenroy, but now you're seeing quite a few, and that's also, that was also connected to the fact that, the other side of the north had the upfield bike path, but we didn't have any, or we still don't have anything, although there's plans on the books and things are starting to happen. So I definitely think we need to do this because also I think as more people are riding bikes, there are also more cars on the road at the same time, and we need to make cycling safer and also have those interconnected pathways. And I think there's, anyone who rides a bike or has family members who ride a bike probably have got dozens of places where you that you can think of that need improvement. But certainly I think two that I think are really important is one, the east-west link, not the road link that we campaigned against a long time ago, but from Glenroy through to Coburg, like a safe means of getting across by bike, and also the extension of the upfield bike path as Councillor Wood mentioned. I think those are really two incredibly important because I think, yes, bike paths might be great, but at some point you have to get off them or onto them, and often that's when there are danger spots on the there's a lot of danger spots on our Hay Street to access the upfield bike path and many other places in the city. So.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Any further discussion? Being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. We move to DCI 5917, cyclist safety on Gaffney Street, Pascoe Vale.
Move a slightly altered
You're on your
resolution.
feet, so
So
you
I
can
moved, I circulated an amendment earlier today.
Just check.
So it's really an extra couple of points.
Is that based on the email?
Yeah, unless you've already got something ready to roll as an amendment. I think it's similar. So basically, I'm proposing that we have an extra paragraph in addition to note that the current bike lane along the eastern end of Gaffney Street puts cyclists in the Dooring zone, and then further that council raises the safety issues on Gaffney Street around Pascoe Vale train station for cyclists and pedestrians, in particular the lack of a bike lane from the bottom of the hill to Park Street, the need for a pedestrian crossing to allow people to get to the station safely, and examine ways to reduce the speed of traffic on the hill to make it safer for cyclists.
Okay, Councillor Bolton, that you're moving that. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Yildiz? And it is the eastern side of Gaffney Street that you're referring to? Okay. All right, would you like to speak to it?
The first line refers to the eastern side of Gaffney Street, but the second part refers to the Pascoe Vale.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Would you like to speak to it now?
Yes, I would. This is a Vic Roads road, and I think council was really alerted to this because there have been some terrible crashes around the roundabout on the corner of Gaffney Street and Sussex Street, which has been made worse by the Coles development, I believe. But it would have been, it was dangerous anyway, even before Coles was built. But also along Gaffney Street, the situation for cyclists is very dangerous. There are bike lane lines painted on the street, but really they put cyclists in the area where people open their car doors, so it's actually quite dangerous. It's not a super wide street given the amount of traffic that it carries, including the industrial precinct in North Coburg. The report already points out some of the dangers for cyclists around that roundabout, and you could add in pedestrians as well. It raises, so council's been advocating for Vic Roads for some solutions, both in terms of the bike lanes and so forth, but also around the roundabout. Now, the positive thing in the report is that Vic Roads is starting to think about maybe having traffic signals at the roundabout, which would be a massive, massive improvement. But also the other end of Gaffney Street, which is an area I don't go as often as the eastern end of Gaffney Street. This is also very dangerous for cyclists, mainly because there's this massive hill, cars roar down the hill, and the cyclists, it's you have to be extremely confident cyclist to go up and down that hill, and it's really can be quite scary, and then it's not as safe at the bottom of the hill to cross the road there, especially with all the development in Pascoe Vale. So, I'd like to commend this to councillors, unless you can think of extra points that need to go in.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Yildiz, did you want to speak to it? Any other councillors like to contribute? Being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Next report we have is DCI 6017, Children's Crossing Supervisor Report. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Abu. Councillor Bolton, would you like to speak to it?
So this report was in response to a motion I moved earlier this year, or last year, can't quite remember which. It was about the fact that, the Coburg High School is booming with enrolments and so forth, but there were no supervised school crossings for Coburg High School. And then I was also contacted, as well as other councillors, by parents one parent about the lack of a school crossing to get across Urquhart Street just out here to Coburg Primary School. I also requested information about which ones are supervised crossings and which ones are unsupervised crossings where there's a desire to have a supervisor. So that information is included in the report, which is very good. Now, Council has already moved on the question of a supervised crossing for Merri-bek High, and the teachers there are really appreciative of that. But Council officers are recommending that we not have a school crossing where a lot of parents do cross, mainly because of the cars that roar around the corner into Urquhart Street to head up north on Sydney Road. So unfortunately, there's not a solution at the moment for parents crossing with their kids from Pentridge to the primary school. The judgment of the officers is that, you know, to have a school crossing right there when cars are roaring around and then have to plant the brakes might be dangerous. Anyway, the parent who contacted me about that is overseas at the moment, so I'm going to have a chat with him when he gets back about the situation. Maybe there might be some other solutions he can think about. But anyway, so I'd like to move this report. There's some valuable information in it, even though we haven't been able to resolve one issue.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Booth?
Nothing to add.
Any further discussion? Being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. DCI 6117, on-street parking, Medina Estate, Faulkner.
Yes, I'd like to move a procedural motion that this is deferred until the next meeting, please.
As a procedural motion, there'll be no discussion on that. We'll just put the deferral to the vote.
After a public meeting? I'd like to propose it be deferred till after a public meeting.
I don't think you need a motion to hold a public meeting, but
Don't need any motion to cause that to happen. To defer it is enough to allow all those other things to happen.
all right, okay. Happy with that. All right, so I'll put that as a vote. All those in favour of a deferral? Declare that carried. Councillors, I think I'll call for a 5-minute recess at this point. All right, and I believe I don't need a motion for adjournment, so we'll have an adjournment for 5 minutes. Is that right?
Needed a motion for an adjournment.
I've just sought advice from the
You don't actually need a motion. So the Mayor has power to actually call an adjournment.
Apparently, yep. Thank you very much.
We can
Yeah, I
dispute
know.
that.
I did check that, Sue. I did, yeah.
We can dispute the
Yeah, I know.
ruling of the chair.
So 5 minutes.
Yep, 5 minutes.
Hey Morland, today I'm down in St Kilda for the Midsummer Pride March supporting the LGBTQ community. It's a beautiful day. I'm proud to be here representing Morland, walking behind so many wonderful dedicated people. This march goes towards exactly what our values are. At Morland, we're one community proudly diverse. More pride! More pride! More pride! More pride! More pride! More pride!
I'm Moana Hope, most people probably know. I've grown up playing at Glenbrook Football Club and now I play at I grew up in Glenroy, born and bred. My first year I played at Hatfield. From the second year all the way up to under 12 since Glenroy Football Club. I'm one of 14 and the reason why I got into it was with my dad and my brothers. I used to watch all their games from the age of 3. It was community football, so it was the best fun. Local footy is really important, I think, you know, especially Glenmorry being the suburb has been the main supplier of sports in the community. Look at what Glenmorry trying to do here, trying to bring up a women's team, and in the background is my niece who just finished under 12, so at the moment she hasn't got a pathway. Melanie's played for Glenmorry from the same age as me, from the age of 7, and she's now too old to play boys for girls, so she's excited about the girls. So she's extremely competitive, not as good as me. The new kids are not on the right road, and I think if you give them that sport or that outlet to go and meet new people, it could benefit the community in more ways than one. What do I say to girls? because it doesn't matter who you are, what your skill level you are, what fitness level you are, it's a good environment to be in, it's fun, you meet new mates. This is where you want to be, so come down and have a kick.
I'll take the fantastic immediate step.
So I'm Claire Dawson and I'm an accredited cricket bat maker, the first female in the world. I learnt how to make cricket bats from Ian Cullen. There was bats out there for men, and I felt that there was an opportunity there to actually work with women to make better bats and to actually make them for their style. So recently I was commissioned to make 5 cricket bats for the Pascoe Bay Cricket Club, for their under-13s girls cricket team, and to see their faces when they were given cricket bats was just brilliant. So what I really love to be able to do is to keep working with my local community, local cricket clubs, particularly the women, and work to make great cricket bats.
My name is Michael Tortoni. I'm the founder of Melbourne's legendary jazz club, Bennett's Lane. I've recently moved to the very, very cool Brunswick. The Jazz Lab here on Leslie Street, Brunswick is Melbourne's new home of jazz. In my old club, you might have seen Prince for a late night set, or the Wynton Marsalis Band, or even the Harry Connick Jr. Trio. My new club will also host stars of contemporary music, starting with the Bill Frisell Trio for the Melbourne International Jazz Festival, as well as local stars. So drop in for some great music and a drink at the Jazz Lab.
What's this? The big picture? If you wouldn't have reasons, shut up. But he's reading now. It's just
So my name is Zainab Abouid. I'm 19 years old and I currently study the Bachelor's of Law and International Relations at the Chartered University. I partake in my local community by volunteering with local MPs such as Peter Khalil. I like to also attend and organise events that surround family violence to help ensure that women are heard and young women have voices. I wanted to represent myself as a Muslim woman and represent my community. So I thought, why not start at a young age? So when I grow up, perhaps I can become big in Parliament one day. I feel like I should take advantage of these opportunities and make sure that I advocate on behalf of women, especially in my community that are subjected to family violence.
So, I mean, you know, they can worry.
My name's Leslie. I have been with Moreland Family Daycare as an educator for over 36 years, I think. Family Daycare is a wonderful organisation. We look after children in our own home, they blend in with the family, and it's fantastic.
I love Family Daycare.
I can choose my own hours, very flexible. I've made wonderful friendships with lots of the families. I'm now looking after children of the children I used to care for. The children just growing and developing is a wonderful, wonderful experience for me every day. I'd recommend Family Daycare to anybody and everybody. Oh, where's my Scouty snuggle? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Can I have a Scouty snuggle? How's your tea party going?
Oh, haven't you?
My name's Hilary. I've been with Moreland Family Daycare for 8 months now, and I absolutely love it. The main reason I started with Family Daycare was to be with my little one. Family Daycare is a small environment, so mostly I only have 4 children, and it's in a home. Moreland have been really supportive with the whole thing, and they helped me find children when I first started. There's so many benefits of working Family Daycare and becoming an educator. Working in your own home, flexible hours, also just watching the other children grow and being such a part of their lives. I recommend to educators that want a good life balance, if they have their own child, Family Daycare is a great avenue to go down.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. It's funny because I saw the letter. I thought actually it's just enough for you guys to know. You don't have to do anything else. Yeah. Nothing more needed.
Sorry, Councillor Tapanos, we're about to start back. got 1, we've got 2, we've got 3, we've got 4.
Hey Morland, today I'm down in St Kilda for the Midsummer Pride March supporting the LGBTQ community. It's a beautiful day. I'm proud to be here representing Morland, walking behind so many wonderful dedicated people. This march goes towards exactly what our values are. At Morland, we're one community proudly diverse.
Okay, we're about to start. Okay, we're resuming the meeting, councillors. So, councillors, we're looking at DCI 6217, contract 599T, Campbell Reserve, election commitment, sporting infrastructure improvements.
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to move, and with your permission, is it okay to move the 3 reports that deal with contracts on block?
That's fine with me. Does any councillor have an objection to moving the 3 contract items as one?
Could
Yes.
we take Campbell Reserve out?
You like Campbell Reserve out? Okay. All right. So we'll move. Actually, we'll deal with Campbell Reserve separately, and then we'll do the other 2 items on block then. Okay. So Campbell Reserve. Yep. So you're happy to move the Campbell Reserve report?
Yes, certainly.
Councillor Tapanos, and seconded by Councillor Yildiz. Would you like to talk to the Campbell
Very,
Reserve?
very briefly, but it is great to see some real investment going into pavilions, sporting pavilions. I know how expensive they are, and I know how much they mean to the clubs, and I know that this council has worked really hard to get to upgrade its pavilions in the more recent years, because we had very limited financial resources in the past. And I particularly like to acknowledge the work of our Mayor, Councillor Kavanagh, and also Councillor Oscar Yildiz, for many years advocating for pavilion upgrades. But I just wanted to know that we were really, really fortunate to be able to get a state grant, and this has really meant that we could get a couple of pavilions, particularly Morris and Campbell, up and going. And it's so pleasing to actually see that we're at this stage of we're awarding the tender, and that we're not only undertaking that commitment, but we're putting even more money than we originally thought to ensure that we get the best possible outcome we can and keep the club growing and make sure it's got facilities that can enable that growth.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Yildiz? Anyone like to discuss this one?
I sort of feel like I'd like to ask a question to the Director before I work out how I vote
yes,
on this.
you can ask a question, yes.
What I was now actually, which director is the question?
It depends
so
what
the
it is,
question is it possible, or are council officers considering having some sort of meeting with local residents prior to the works commencing, both to inform people about the scope of the works, but also to make sure that passive uses and dog walker kind of uses of the space are not impeded?
I think.
Mayor, Councillor Bolt and I replied to a question earlier today. Whether you were here or not, I can't remember.
Yeah, no, I was here,
Okay.
but you didn't.
So there is a
was
meeting being put together, hopefully for next week, between the club and local residents, just to explore whatever issues they want to explore.
Okay, alrighty. I wasn't as clear as that in the meeting earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. All right, Councillor Martin would like to speak to it.
I also just have one 1.7 that I'd like to add, and if it's okay with the mover and the seconder, it's just something simple that council investigates installing solar on the pavilion as well.
Yeah, I don't have a concern with that.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, investigates. Yeah, okay. What would you say?
Sure.
What did you say?
No, that would blow the budget. Let's
Okay. All right, so it's acceptable to the mover and the seconder?
It is.
So being accepted, then it becomes part of the substantive motion. Okay. Do we have any other discussion on the item? Being no further discussion, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move the
2 contracts. So you're moving DCI 6317, which is contract 649T, supply and installation of in-ground parking sensors, mobile phone applications, issuing of infringements and ongoing maintenance, and DCI 6417, road construction at Queen Street, Cobu, between Moreland Road and Lever Street. Right, and that's moved by Councillor Tapanos as a block of 2 and seconded by Councillor Abood as a block of 2. Any discussion on either of those 2 reports? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. We move on to DCI 6517, an enclosed dog park proposal. We have a mover in Councillor Davidson. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Martin.
Yep, so this is on page 331. And the results from the consultation was huge. So there was, I think, 1,055 people made a submission about where they wanted an enclosed dog park in Moreland. We don't have one. And I think it's so important that we have an area where our dogs can socialise and feel safe and secure with an enclosure rather than being close to residential properties and potential roads. I think our pets in Moreland, it shows through these results, are so important to us. And to have this space, and it's going to be in Gilpin Park in Brunswick, and then a second reserve has been allocated and refers $80,000 to the construction of another dog park in Richards Reserve. And that's going to be in the budget process for next year. It's something I'm incredibly pleased to see, and I can't wait to take my little German Shepherd there when this opens.
He's not little.
He's huge.
Councillor Martin.
Really quickly, I really would like to commend Councillor Davidson on all of her work in driving this. I think it's really, I mean, we can put up maybe some pictures and some various plaques and whatnot maybe at some point later on, but I really do think that it is a credit to your hard work that we're seeing this happen.
Thank you very much.
Good. Any other discussion?
Just very quickly.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not a dog owner, and Councillor Davidson is really one of the people who's made it very clear to me how important owning a pet is for quite a lot of people, and I really commend this work because it isn't something that I would have done, but I fully understand why you did do it, and I think it's great. Good on you. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. We move on to social development, DSD 4517, Establishment of Moreland Affordable Housing Limited. Councillor Riley would like to move. Now, do you have a slightly, is it the officer recommendation, Councillor Riley?
It's the officer recommendation with two amendments that I sent around.
Yep.
So,
fine.
Two additions.
Okay.
Can you read them out?
Yep. So, thank you.
Yep. I think they are on the screen, if you want to read it off the screen.
Yes, I've got my notes here.
Okay, no, of course.
I will get them
Just
up
want to make sure that everyone's clear.
eventually. Sorry.
Take your time.
Machine doesn't want to work. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go. Thank you.
Just, if you could just read the amendments at the moment, just so we're perfectly clear, and then.
So we want to add to the motion that subject to the following change on number 2, A, amend clause 17.4.2 so that the stated times for electing a chairperson for general and board meetings aligns with 12.2.2 to read, if at any meeting time the chairperson is not present within 15 minutes, etc.
Okay, fine. Happy with all that. Okay. Now, I think everyone...
And the other one was to endorse the board recruitment and employment plan so that the addition there is subject to the following change. A, amend the distribution strategy section of the board recruitment and employment plan by inserting after the 4th dot point on that plan, housing associations and providers, youth projects, Hope Street Youth and Family Services, Wishen, and any other local organisations which align with the target groups in the list above, and other organisations that align to the target groups list to recruiting women, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, migrant and refugee communities, people with disabilities, and LGBTIQ communities to the Moreland Affordable Housing Limited Board. So
And so they're your changes?
The changes.
Okay, so I think everyone's probably familiar with all the other points. So do I have a seconder for Councillor Riley's amendment? Councillor Bolton. Good. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Riley?
Just briefly, I want to speak briefly, but this project's actually been many, many years in the making, and I want to just acknowledge the research, development and effort that's gone in by members of that committee, the Moreland Affordable Housing Committee, the staff and former councillors. This goes way back. It's going to go a long way to addressing equity issues and fairness in our city, and especially with those people on lower income scales, and not just those on the lowest of income brackets, so those receiving pensions or unemployment benefits and the like, but people who are on working, low income working incomes below that middle bracket. And the work that has been going on, I suspect it may actually be lives of three councils, I think, or at least, if not that long,
probably is. 2.5
councils. So that's around about 10 to 12 years of work, and for this to come to fruition. And it's a milestone. It's actually a first for a council to undertake this work. And I want to acknowledge the work of previous councillors. If I may, I just want to touch on the work of former councillor Linka Thompson, who worked with Sue Bolton on this work in the previous iteration of the council. But prior to that was also Councillor Andrea Sharam, who had a lot of input into getting this initiative going. So it's really important that we do this work to keep some form of housing in our city that is affordable and accessible to people. And if we're going to maintain our diversity and develop our communities and the culture that we have here and keep what is good about Moreland, it's really important that we undertake these initiatives. The work of this motion will be to establish the constitution to allow us to then go into getting the board set up for this company, and then it'll be slightly set aside from council, even though we'll have quite strong representation on that board. And it's a model that we've kind of used in the past for other initiatives we've undertaken. It's a sign of the progressive nature of this council, and I just again want to thank all the people who've been involved in this and encourage people to participate and to also help us recruit some very suitable members for the board when we get to that stage of the process. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Bolton?
I don't, there's sort of more just a practical thing about setting up the board and the constitution and so forth. So, I think we just need to get on with it. I don't really have anything special to add about, corporate structures and that kind of thing. I'm just hoping that, we'll have, because this will be council land that will be used, so I'm hoping that we'll have enough protections around it, around the council land, and enough guidance for the board that it truly delivers what we want it to deliver, which is genuinely affordable housing.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, I'll put it to vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. DSD 4617, Moreland Toy Library. Do I have a mover for this?
An alternative resolution, which I
Councillor
circulated earlier. I can read out while it's coming up, if you like. Yep. That council notes the valuable work that the Moreland Toy Library contributes to the Moreland community. Council also notes that with the expansion to a second site, the Moreland Toy Library will need more certainty of funding in the initial stage. Therefore, Council will initiate a memorandum of understanding with the Toy Library for a 3-year period commencing July 2018, utilising $10,000 from the organisational support grant category. So the last part is really just a slightly adapted version of point 4.
Right, okay. And does that, can I ask Councillor Bolton, does that mean it conflicts with point 4 or not? Because one, I think, is saying do it through the grant, and one is saying do it through the MOU. Is that right?
It's sort of offering alternative, like the, sorry to be speaking
No, that's
not to
right,
the
no.
motion exactly.
No,
The way the motion was worded, I felt was sort of saying we could do it this way and could do it that way. And in that point for it offers some advice about if we're doing it through an MOU, just do it for 3 years until this end point. And I believe that is what would suit the toy library. Then obviously they'd go through the operational grants program. So that was why I was modifying that a little bit to make it more affirmative.
Okay, I might just go to the CEO and then I'll, yes.
So just through the Mayor, I'll just clarify that motion. So point 2 is the officer recommendation based on the lack of a framework and process, etc., where we're basically saying we would be recommending using the organisational support grant rather than an MOU. But the last point says that if you are seeking that immediate certainty, this is how you would do it. So if that's what you're wanting to move, then it would be better to actually delete point 2 and say, well, basically the amended version of that point 4, which is that council enters an MOU. Actually, the second sentence, that council determines to pursue an MOU with the toy library for the 3-year period commencing July 2018. So you would delete point 2 and you'd remove part of point 4 in order to say that's what you are determining to do.
Delete the ifs.
Can I?
That's it.
Yeah, can I offer that suggestion? What I would like to see is keep point 1, delete point 2, keep point 3, delete point 4, and then add the additional point moved by Councillor Sue Bolton, and also delete the words after $10,000 from the organisational support grant category and add refer the sum to the 2018-2019 budget process.
Is that different to council?
Yes.
Okay.
They're two different things.
Oh, yeah, I thought there were two different things there, I think, from councillor.
Is that acceptable?
So can I clarify?
Yeah,
I think most of it, I was sort of trying to simplify it because I felt that it was a little bit unclear, the motion, because it was talking about 2 possible directions. But I'm also happy enough to keep some of the earlier parts in. So I am happy enough to keep point 1 in, delete point 2, leave point 3 in and delete the earlier part of point 4, and just leave that next bit in that council determines to pursue an MOU with the toy library. I guess it's inferred that it would be referred to the budget process because it says commencing July 2018. So I don't think we necessarily need those words unless the CEO thinks we need them.
I might just go back to the CEO just for some advice here.
So just through the Mayor, there's nothing wrong with adding to be referred to the process. That makes no difference. Probably the key thing is you've allocated or you've indicated you want to put 100,000 to these grants, and what that's saying is you then are dipping into 10,000 of that 100,000. Otherwise, you're then adding something over the top of the 100,000. That's the effect that it has. So I don't think you need to say anything further to make it go into the budget process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're deleting point 2. Obviously, point 3 becomes point 2 then, I assume, and point 4 and 3, etc. So can I give the officers a moment or two to do that, just so that we're clear on what we're... now, am I correct, Councillor Tapanos, that at the end of this I'll be asking, are you comfortable to second this item?
Yes, I will.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Thank you.
Just through the Mayor, it also notes in point 2 that it would be referred to the budget process. So we covered that point.
Yeah. Right, okay. So we just changed the 4 to the 3? And so can we just check that before I go to Councillor Boo? As far as you as the mover, Councillor Bolton, are you satisfied with what's up there now?
Yeah, I'm satisfied and...
Yeah, and you're satisfied as a seconder. All right, Councillor Boo.
Yes, I'd like to put a procedural motion that this be deferred, please.
All right, that's a procedural motion, and we don't need a seconder. I'll put that to the vote now.
Can I ask?
Oh, yeah. I'll let you answer, but all right.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer. The reason I've asked that it be deferred is because the amendments were given to me at 9 minutes before the meeting started, and I have no idea what's going on now. And I'll be abstaining from voting on this because I understand the intention was to support the toy library, but it's become quite convoluted and I just can't make a decision under these conditions, and that's why I asked for the deferral.
I'm going to put the deferral without any further discussion now. All right. Those in favour of a deferral? Those against? It's got the casting vote. I'm going to vote against the deferral.
That's fine.
All right, with the casting vote. I understand what you're saying, Councillor Abood, but I think, you know, I think with it up on the thing, I'm comfortable with how it's going now. All right, so we have a mover and we have a seconder, and the deferral has been defeated. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Bolton?
I'd like to. This amended motion, you know, elements of this were already in the actual original motion that was proposed by council officers, which councillors have had for, you know, a week now. So it's not like a surprising thing. The reason I moved this motion for to make a definite commitment to an MOU rather than a grant is because the toy library is setting up a new on a new site in Pascoe Vale to bring the toy library up to the north. It's expanding, so that will be a huge burden for the toy library, and it would be a better situation for them if they can have some financial certainty for this initial period where they'll be setting up this new site, which will really stretch them so that they can set it up properly without worrying about the competition for grants. Then obviously at the end of that period, according to this motion, which was also what the council officers recommended, they'd, you know, have to start the process of applying for grants again. But this is this motion is not like a totally new motion. It included elements of what were being recommended by the council officers, just they didn't come down on one side or the other in relation to an MOU or an organisational grants issue. One of the issues for the toy library, for a lot of volunteer organisations, and they do have a part-time coordinator that they do employ now, but it is mostly predominantly a volunteer organisation. They like to keep their fees low so that people on low incomes are able to use the toy library. They've sometimes had higher income members who've said, why don't we just put up the fees rather than applying for all these grants? But they've got a philosophical commitment to keep the library accessible for people on low incomes. And I think that's something which is admirable and I think we should support and encourage. So, yes, I think we do need to pass this motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Tapanos, seconder.
Thank you. Councillors, I think this will be some of the best $10,000 we have spent. We certainly will get, the community will certainly get a substantial amount of value. We've already seen the Moreland Toy Library and how they operate and what they contribute to the community, and I'm sure that through the MOU process we'll be able to actually really tell a story of how many families use it, the social interactions, the amount of toys that get leased, and all of the positive work that they do. And I just feel that when we are asking a community organisation to expand in the north of the municipality to offer this great service that they do in Brunswick and look to expand it because there is such demand, we know that they're at capacity, we should be supporting them and we should be giving them certainty and doing it as soon as possible. And I think this motion does that. I got no doubt that they would be successful in any grant application in 8 months' time or so. But I think tonight we should be saying to them, you have this money and you can go away and you can plan for the future and you can plan for this future growth. And that's going to be very important, and certainly it would inspire them and encourage them to make the move up north and to actually purchase new toys and make those plans for the future. So I think that the time is now. This has been discussed for a number of months, and it's a commitment of $10,000 and one that I know that our community will see so much value in return for.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Is there any further discussion on this item? Being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried.
Can I have that recorded as unanimous?
Yep. Unanimous?
I abstained.
Oh, sorry. No, it wasn't unanimous. Councillor Abood abstained. Yeah, apologies. Yep. Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Abood, for pointing that out. DSD 4717, 2017 Christmas lunch for disadvantaged and vulnerable people in the community.
Yep. I'd like to move the recommendations in the report, and that is to partner with the Salvation Army and Merri Health to hold a Christmas lunch for disadvantaged and vulnerable people, and note that it's only $1,000 that will be required to be spent on this event.
Moved by Councillor Davidson, seconded by Councillor Abood. Would you like to talk to it a bit more?
Yes, please. So this is something that many councils do around Melbourne and Victoria, and it's to have a Christmas lunch for people that might be experiencing a little bit of hardship. They might be vulnerable at the moment, be homeless, and I really would like to thank the director, Arden Joseph, for his leadership in this and really coming together with the Salvation Army and Merri Health. The Salvation Army already have a lunch on Christmas Day, and they have 25 people attend, and with Council and Merri Health coming together, that's going to be expanded to 50 people, and potentially that could grow from there. And I'd encourage councillors to also attend on Christmas Day and to put in an hour or two, and residents and people in the community, because I think that those people sitting at that table that might be experiencing a little bit of hardship, that might be me one day, and somebody might be caring for me. So I'd encourage everybody to come along and help make that day special.
Thanks, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Abood?
Yeah, the only thing that I don't like about this particular item is that I won't be able to attend. My Christmas Day involves racing to church, racing to my Auntie Jane's, sitting at my Auntie Jane's for a little bit too long, and then racing to my in-laws. And there's about 40 people involved. And but I think it's fantastic, and I commend this work, and I'm sure it'll be a really valuable, important thing to do. And for me personally, it's good to have something to feel good about, because I did want to support the previous motion, but I didn't know how to.
Yep. Any other discussion? Yeah. I might just say something from the chair on this one. Yes, you're right, Councillor Abood. They will be encouraging councillors and the mayor to attend if at all possible, realising it's Christmas Day. I was pleasantly surprised when I went home and said the other night, I think if this gets passed, that naturally I'll be attending for Christmas lunch. And immediately my eldest son said, well, I'll be coming with your dad. I think it's a great idea. So I was really pleased with that. So, yeah, looking forward to joining them on the day. Sorry? Oh, right, okay. All right, and I'll put that, and I'll close the debate there, and I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. DSD 4817, Moreland Arts Board membership.
It's 2 Gmail accounts, or spam.
Councillor Riley is on his feet. Has moved that. Can we have a seconder? Councillor Abood. Thank you, Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Mayor Kavanagh. Just want to reiterate that this was deferred from the last meeting, and after some discussions we've resolved that Council will appoint as members of the Moreland Arts Board Rohini Sharma, Linda Short, Izzy Roberts Orr, Jane Hartnell, Olivia Poloni and Dan Walmering. So we're very grateful for their stepping up to support this. And in point 2, note the officers have commenced a second expression of interest process to recruit the remaining 3 vacant positions on the Moreland Arts Board and address the identified gap in skills, experience and diversity of the report, including recommendations for the final 3 positions expected to be presented to Council in December 2017. So I think it's a very commendable motion. I don't need to say much more, but welcome them to the fold and hope that everyone's got a unanimous vote on this.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Abood?
Yep, this is fantastic. It's great to have an arts board. I'm interested that there are still some spaces available, and I don't know if we ever suggest people for the arts board, but if we do, I would like to note that there are some pretty amazing artists in this city, and specifically a man called Tom Civil, who I've never actually met, but he has some pretty easily identifiable artwork happening in the city, and also Sean Tan, who's an author that lives in the city, who does some really remarkable work too.
Also an Academy Oscar winner. Sean Tan, yeah, brilliant Oscar. Yep. Yep. Good. Any other discussion? I'll put that, there being no discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. Now we've got DSD 4917, Implementation of Moreland Early Years Strategy 2016-2020. I have a mover, Councillor Martin, and seconded by Councillor Abood. Councillor Martin.
I'll be really brief. I would really like to thank the officers for this strategy. I myself don't particularly use many of the early years things, but I do have an awful lot of friends who do use them and are incredibly grateful. I think I've heard the number of times that I've heard the Moreland maternal child health, the early services, the playgroups that Moreland provides is state of the art, and so it comes from strategies like this. So I would like to commend the officers for putting this together.
Thank you very much, Councillor Martin. Councillor Abood.
Just very quickly to add that I have used them several times and commend the work that the council does supporting new parents in the city and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abood. Any other councillors like? Being no further discussion, put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. Councillors, that concludes the presentation of officer reports. I would like to now move on to the notices of motion. Councillors, can I ask that you start by stating the motion and then provide a brief background. The first notice of motion we have this evening is notice of motion 1617, open space at Reserve 1 on PS 343450, rear of 106 McBride Street, Faulkner. And we have Councillor Abood on the feet.
So the motion reads that Moreland Council writes to Vic Roads indicating Council wishes to explore how all the land at Reserve 1 on PS 343450, the rear of 106 McBride Street, Faulkner, can be retained as public open space prior to any further progress on the land swap resolved by Council in 2015. And point 2, that Council calls for a report outlining how the public open space owned by Vic Roads at Reserve 1 on PS 343450, rear of 106 McBride Street, Faulkner, can be retained as open space. The report should include an exploration of the implications of a 50-metre setback from the Merri Creek being included in the land swap instead of the current 35 metres. And if I have a seconder, I'll speak to it.
Councillor Martin.
Right, so this, the best I can probably say to this is that the report will answer the reason why this needed to come here. This has been a very complicated piece of work that impacts a huge area of the city beyond just the neighbourhood that it sits in. It butts up against the Merri Creek, and as one of the as the councillor responsible for the Merri Creek Management Committee, I have understood to some extent, and I live on the creek, how important habitat up against butting up against the creek and what these corridors of habitat mean and how important they are. Recently I passed a motion at a planning meeting for this particular piece of land to be subdivided. I did that because I don't believe, and some people understand this, that stopping that subdivision would have stopped the land swap that we're talking about. I think that we need to explore further ways to retain this land for the council, and I think that this report will help outline how that can be done. And there's already been, at least one meeting and a lot of conversations about the detail, the history, and what options we have for a way forward. I want to also point out that we have support in the state from our newest member of the Legislative Council who put a question today in that particular chamber, and I hope that we have the ears of the state government.
Thank you, Councillor Abood. Councillor Martin?
In talking this, everything that Councillor Abood has just said, I fully echo. Really, what we're wanting to do here is secure this piece of land. Let's make sure that we're able to maintain that 50-metre setback, but also let's have a discussion with Vic Roads. Let's have a discussion with Vic Track. Let's stop selling these off to council, and let's have discussions about everything that we've got in there, and let's talk about handing it over at a reasonable price if you are still going to sell it. But let's talk about actually protecting our parks.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Bolton.
I've got an amendment. The amendment is for an extra dot point that council seeks evaluation from the valuer general for the whole property as public open space.
Okay, that's so is that acceptable to the mover and the seconder?
Yeah, no, that's not acceptable, and I've explained the reasons why this afternoon on the phone at 5:30.
Okay, so that hasn't been accepted as a standard motion. Would you like to put that motion as a separate motion?
Well,
Yep.
standard procedure for amendment is to see if anyone else would like to second that motion. That amendment. So I would like to.
So is there anyone else that would like to second Councillor Bolton's motion there of her DOS point? Okay, so it lapsed for want of a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Bolton. So we go back to the original motion. Is there any further discussion on the original motion moved by Councillor Abood and seconded by Councillor Martin? Yes, Councillor Bolton.
I'd certainly like to support this motion. I think it's quite critical to start to unpick a process which had begun without any kind of public consultation. And I think the reason the process for this land swap had gone so far was because of lack of public consultation at the very, very beginning. But I think this is an opportunity for us to start to address that. The walk through the area, organised by the Fawkner Residents Association, was very successful with a wide range of people. I don't know, I didn't count, but it might have been up to 50 people. And I think it engaged quite a lot of people, both from Fawkner and people outside of Fawkner who really care about the creek and care about open space. So it was quite a diverse crowd on the day. And I think, I think we've got to do everything we can to try and retain this land as public open space. It's been quite modified by Vic Roads and other players in the area, so that, I think a lot of that area right beside the creek that Vic Roads is, was planning to swap to council is actually land that they couldn't use anyway, so it was never really a good deal, even looking at it in the dollars and cents factor, let alone looking at the open space issue. And it certainly is treasured beyond the Fawkner area.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Yeah, if there's any other discussion, okay, I think Councillor Abood would like to close the debate. Thank you, Councillor Abood.
Yes, so I just want to acknowledge that I've been abused in email, abused in person, and then praised for the work in email and person, for the work that I'm trying to undertake here. I agree that the land swap wasn't a good deal, and that's why I'm glad I wasn't on the council that voted unanimously for it to happen. I'm glad that there are people engaged, and I hope that they in turn are trying to engage the state member for Broadmeadows, who needs to put up his hand and fight for this situation, the same way as the former state member for Pascoe Vale was involved in securing a scenario where Moreland City Council was able to become the committee of management for the land that abuts the Edgars Creek, which now has a really beautiful wetland built on it, which is thanks to the open space team. So I'm looking forward to seeing this play out, and I'm going to continue to do what I think I can with the advice of the people who I think know what's going on to try and find out a way to secure this land. I've been speaking to people across the creek in relation to the situation with Lakeside College, which was a similar scenario, except that that was annexed to a school which cost almost $6.4 million. So I'm happy to acknowledge that, yes, that land at Lakeside College went for much less, more like 270. But this is a unique scenario because we are 2 years along the road to a decision that was made by the previous council. And I can't stress that enough, and I can't stress that I have the best interests of this piece of land at heart, and also the residents of Fawkner and the people who live along the creek and enjoy the creek further downstream as well.
Thank you, Councillor Abood. That concludes the debate, so I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. Unanimous.
Can that be recorded as unanimous, please?
Unanimous. We have now notice of motion 6117, land sales / transfers beside Morelands Waterways. Councillor Bolton.
So what I'm moving is a modified version of what appears on the agenda paper, because I've incorporated some changes proposed by Councillor Riley. So what I'm moving is that when Moreland Council becomes aware of possible land swaps, land transfers and land sales adjacent to the Merri Creek and Moonee Ponds Creek, regardless of whether the land in question is owned by the state or federal government, a state or federal government authority or the council, that the public be notified and consulted. That councillors, a second paragraph, the councillors advocate to state and federal governments that sufficient time be made available to enable consultation with local communities with particular regard to state government disposal of surplus land it offers under a first right of refusal process.
Sorry, Councillor Bolton, when you read it, you said councillors in the second point. It says council there. Is it councillors?
I think it was recommended that be modified
To
to
councillors. Yes, I thought so.
Partly because that's a political lobbying element, would put the council officers in a bad position if it was just the council. And then the last point is for land along waterways, public consultation will be conducted with nearby residents, the Merri Creek and Moonee Ponds Creek Management Committees and the Friends of Merri Creek and the Friends of Moonee Ponds Creek.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, okay. I just want the CEO wants to clarify something here.
So just through the Mayor, so I just want to clarify what you said versus what we've done. So I just want to make sure that all matches. So point one, when Moreland councillors, that's the advice we gave, that should be referred to councillors. I think you referred to the second point, Sue. It's actually the first point. That was part of the discussion this afternoon. So I just want to draw your attention to it to make sure that is you're aware of exactly what's on the screen, because it didn't sound like that's what you said.
I would think that should be Moreland Council, because I think in this particular instance, the original decision for 104B McBride Street, I think councillors became aware a bit later in the piece about the proposal for a land swap, but not the potential to perhaps acquire the land. So I would think that ought to be Moreland Council, unless we put something in about councillors being, actually maybe that's the thing, is to put something in to say that councillors, so maybe there should be a first point, okay, let me think on my feet, that when Moreland Council becomes aware of possible land swaps, blah, 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 all the way down to land that's owned by a state or federal government authority or the council, that councillors be notified, and then the public be notified and consulted.
Councillor Bolton, can I just ask the CEO just to explain what the reasoning is for recommending that?
So there was a specific reason why we wanted to be clear who you were referring to when you say Moreland Council, and we are recommending to you that you mean council, as in this chamber, not any officer in the organisation. If you mean this council plus also any officer in the organisation, if any authority, any staff member from any part of any authority says one word about anything that they're even dreaming about, then your motion requires us to immediately notify when there may not even be a project there. So that's the concern. So but when it comes to you, it's actually a project, and I think I see the problem you're trying to solve, which is do the notification so that people can see that at the same time that you're making the decision, rather than sometimes people understand it after the decision. So I understand what you're trying to do, and I think if you make it clear that it is Moreland councillors, that will avoid the unintended consequence of any junior staff member hearing something that suddenly they now have to publicly notify.
No, I can accept that.
Mr Mayor, can I move a deferral? And I'm happy to explain why. I think we should discuss this motion a little bit more, and I think it might be counterproductive in many ways, even though I would like to support it.
Right, you're moving a deferral, so I'm not going to give you any more time to discuss it. It's a procedural motion. I don't need a seconder, so I'm going to put forward Councillor Tapanos's motion to defer. Put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Okay, the deferral is lost. Now, councillor Bolton, we've come up with those words on the screen. I want to check that you're satisfied.
There is a little bit that's dropped out, like a third point, which is for land along waterways.
Sue, it's up there.
Oh, yeah,
Sorry,
there it is.
yeah.
Oh, so that should
It's
be
got to be
the,
moved into the right
That
order.
should be underneath.
yeah, it should be the third
three.
point, should it?
Yeah.
Okay, so just checking. So we've got 3 points now. First point beginning with when Moreland councillors become aware. Second point, the council advocates. Third point for land along waterways. Is everyone clear on what we're voting on? Okay.
Sorry, can I just clarify? Consultation with nearby residents is very nearby. That's a big, like, I don't know what nearby means. Do you mean adjacent? Do you, like, I think we need some parameters on the word nearby.
Well, certainly, I think it needs to be a little bit more than adjacent. For instance, it probably should include signs in the area. If it's a grassy area, you should include signs and that kind of thing. So do you want me to specify all of that?
Yeah.
Well, can we,
I mean,
through
the
the
planning
mayor,
department's got some guidelines about concept.
Yes.
so through the mayor, and I might suggest, so public consultation will be conducted with nearby residents. You might, in brackets, say including adjacent residents and signage at the site.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right, so that's moved by councillor Bolton. Did you have a second? Were you seconding that, councillor Riley? It's councillor Riley was seconding. All right. Now, I don't think councillor Bolton's had an opportunity to talk to the motion yet, so would you like to do that now, councillor?
Yes, I think this is a really important motion because I think if we'd had some level of consultation in the very beginning, I think we would have, it would have pulled the council up from making a problematic decision. I think we didn't think about all of the angles with the original motion for the land swap, and I've seen a few instances on council where there's not enough public input and council has made, with the best intentions, a certain decision, but it's not a good decision because there hasn't been public consultation. And I think this is one of those things. So this is a response to one of those decisions, because the original proposal that came to council was painted as sort of like a win-win. In return for, we'll swap this land and it will complete a gap in the open space that council has owns and controls beside the creek. But I think if at that point we had, when we became aware of the possibility for a land swap, if there had been public notification, I believe we would not have made the decision we made. I think we would have been thinking about the public open space much more, about gaining control of the public open space and about the 50-metre buffer zone from the creek. I think both of those things would have been drawn to our attention, and I think we might have made a very different decision. And I also think the same thing happened in the previous council when I moved a motion around Hopetown Crescent, when I was contacted by residents and the Ponds, friends of Merri Ponds, that park goers just stumbled across someone surveying, and it was part of a fast-track process initiated by Melbourne Water, and there was no notification of anybody for that as well. And so then council had to chase its tail to try and negotiate to get access to that land, and had to cough up, quite a lot of money, although not as much as Melbourne Water was initially demanding. So I think this is a protective resolution to protect the council from making decisions without enough input from the local residents and other interested people.
Thank you, councillor Bolton. Councillor Riley?
Look, just wanted to thanks for that, councillor Bolton. My intention with the amendment was that we covered with the public be notified and consulted, and then we've had some changes since then, which I wasn't quite aware of. I was just trying to broaden it out for the whole city rather than just making it only about our waterways. And I treasure our waterways in every other part of the city as much as any other part. But so I'm comfortable with where it's sitting at the moment in terms of the consultation and so on.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Any other discussion? Councillor Boot.
Thank you. I'd like to commend this nom to Councillor Bolton's, and just explain why I didn't support the deferral, even though it might have looked from the gallery and beyond like the same kind of chaos while we worked out what we were doing. We had some information about this at a briefing on Monday night, and this afternoon we've been just discussing and clarifying exactly the detail that Councillor Riley put forward. I'm happy to support this because I do feel like it will go some ways towards ensuring that groups like the Merri Creek Management Committee and the Friends of Merri Creek know what's going on specifically with land along the waterways, which is super important. And I just wanted to flag something else that I heard about today, which I think might also act towards part of a solution, which I heard about from the neighbours across the creek, called the Darebin Nature Trust, which is being created now. And I sort of think that this might be something good that we might be able to tap in the future, that will involve the kind of consultation that we'll need to have in the future so that we can work out how best to deal with land butting up against this precious space that we have in the middle of our city or running along the side.
Thank you, Councillor Boot. Any further discussion? Being no further discussion, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried.
I'd like that recorded as unanimous too, please.
Unanimous recording, please. Thank you. Next notice of motion is notice of motion 6217, closure of the upfield bike path. It's moved by Councillor Bolton. Yes, Councillor Bolton.
So this is a fairly simple, straightforward motion that Council seeks to negotiate with Neo Metro an outcome whereby the upfield shared pathway is kept open throughout the development or is closed for a minimal amount of time. Possible alternatives to closure could be scaffolding being erected to ensure continuing cyclist and pedestrian access during construction, as occurs for pedestrian access past building sites in the CBD.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. And Councillor Boot is seconding. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Bolton?
Yes, I felt that our original motion that was passed, I can't remember if it's earlier this year or last year, I thought, really was a bit soft on Neo Metro. And certainly one of the local residents who lives up the north, but, uses the upfield bike path quite a lot, is very upset about the long detour that people will have to be in. Well, Neo Metro would like to force people to go on, and the extended period that the bike path will be closed, because this is a major highway, and this is, we talked earlier about Brunswick having the highest number of cyclists of any suburbs in the country, and that is a lot of bikes that have got to fit into other areas of the municipality. And certainly one of the local residents, John Englert, suggested that in the city, when there are these sorts of projects, they don't usually shut off footpaths. They usually have some sort of construction over the top to enable people to keep using those footpaths. So surely a major construction company like Neo Metro, with all of its money, could do something similar for the upfield bike path. And if there's something absolutely essential, it might just be, closed for a week or two, but we should, go to great lengths to try and make sure the path is kept open.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Boot?
Yes, I'm happy to support this motion because I'm under the understanding that quite a lot of work, this particular work, is already being done, but also because I heard from someone just yesterday, feels like 3 years ago, that they were aware that a development was created, the commons actually was built, and the bike path was not impacted upon, and there was actually a little sort of scaffold tunnel made so that people could keep using the path. And I'd like to also mention that I was contacted by the same cyclist who is in the north, and also lobbies for those trucks that we were talking about before, heading up into the north end of the city, about this scenario. And I think that it's super important. If you've ever walked or cycled along the upfield bike path, there's no denying that it's a very, very busy way, a very, very busy way that people traverse into the city via bike. And since we support that kind of active transport, I think that we need to support ways that it's accessible for the people who use it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Abood. Any other discussion on this? Being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. And notice of motion 6317, use of Coburg Town Hall for serenading a...
Okay, so this motion reads that council waives the hall hire fee and bond for the choirs involved in the Serenading Adela project to conduct dress rehearsals on Tuesday the 2nd and Wednesday the 3rd of January 2018, as well as being a fallback venue in the case of wet weather on the nights of Saturday the 6th of January and Sunday the 7th of January 2018.
Seconded by Councillor Tapanos.
So I'm putting this forward, and this might seem like, you know, quite a lot of nights, four nights, for a single group to use a hall for free. But I'm rising to put this forward because council initiated a number of projects in collaboration with the local Brunswick-Coburg Anti-Conscription Commemoration Committee to note the fact that there's, you know, our municipality, or the original suburbs which now make up our municipality, played a massive role in the anti-conscription campaign 100 years ago, and there's very little recognition of such a massive victory. It was, you know, very similar to the sort of victory that we saw today. And this was the ending of conscription, and the referendum was to introduce conscription was defeated 2 times. Now, it is true that the group has received a grant from council before, but this is a special kind of activity. It was just a one-off kind of grant. This is the final project in the 2-year series of activities of the group. It will be a singing project of about 100 or more members of choirs coming together to do a historical reenactment of serenading Adela Pankhurst when she was in prison for anti-war and anti-conscription activity across the road in Pentridge Prison. Because we can't forecast the weather, and there's a big choir event with about another 300 or so spectators and participants, as in the unruly mob, if it is inclement weather, it will be massively problematic. Being such a large group, which is a coming together of a number of local choirs, it means they need quite a large space. That's probably a time of the year when Coburg Town Hall is not being used so much. Maybe I'll just end there because it's well done.
Thanks, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tapanos.
Just very brief, just echo the words of Councillor Bolton, but just also say it's great to be able to support community organisations commemorating significant events in our past. And I know that they've done a great job in the past, and I've attended a number of events to commemorate the referendum 100 years ago of conscription and so forth, and I'm sure this will be another great event. So I'm happy to support this.
Thank you. Councillor Riley.
I just want to rise to say that I look forward to more progressive times of 1918, when we can actually get some decent amendments to our constitution, some more progressive work in our nation, and I commend the celebration of this time, because I look forward to that coming back to us very soon.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Councillors, that concludes the notice of motion. We move to general business, of which there are none. We moved on to urgent business, of which there is none. Could I have a motion to close the council meeting to the public in accordance with section 89(2) the Local Government Act. Councillor Davidson, seconded by Councillor Abood. Could I put that to the vote? All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. I now declare the council meeting closed to the public. I'd like to request politely, as I can, that you leave the chamber. I thank you for your attendance, and I thank those and for your interest in council, and also those that are viewing on live streaming tonight. Thank you very much, and good night.